Right, that's a manager. I'm not known for my grace. All my PAs. Fans blowing it up. I'm not here. I got my water bottle. Water bottle. Everybody knows something. Chicken pretzels. There's candy. You're not careful, you can get up. We're going to take them back news for all we are going to get a yeah. And it's so upset. The marriage is I just told him because we told him I don't know. There are 16 people. 16 people. Are we going to take it? We're going to take. Are we going to share? One of them is straight. Bernie. I'm gonna give. Should I go? Start right away? Probably should. At 6 o'clock. If anybody else can say. I'm gonna wait for you. Can everybody hear me? Slide going to speed into this. There might be a volume, but I'm going to talk about. First of all, I'd like to welcome you here. This is the Board of Directors of Indian Wells Valley Water District. It's a special board meeting. It's a town hall meeting. Monday, October 21st, and we'll be meeting at 6 p.m. So I officially call it to order. Please stand for the pledge of allegiance. Please follow me. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic which stands one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Can you do a roll call, please? Well, I guess I'll do that. Stan Rufora. Here. David St. Armand. Here. And Ron Kosinski, I'm here. Both Melanie Boyd and Chuck Griffin are absent this time. Posting the agenda declaration. You want to take that, please?
It was posted.
Okay. You know, I believe it was posted. You're right. Third Thursday. That's Thursday. Thank you. Conflict of interest declarations. Anything you stand? No. David? No. And myself, no. This next section, public questions and comments. I'll remind people that you all have a chance to have questions. So if you can't keep your basic comments to short if you can, because we'll be talking about, because this whole meeting is about you guys, not so much us. So this portion of the meeting is reserved for persons designed to address the board on any matter not on the agenda of which the board is jurisdiction. However, no action may be taken by the board of directors on any item not appearing on the agenda. Non-agenda speakers are asked to limit their presentation to 5 minutes. Public questions and comments on the items listed on the agenda will be accepted at any time the item is brought forth for consideration by the board. When you are recognized by the chairperson, please state your name. Is there any public comment? All right, So we're gonna start with some opening comments, and I'm gonna have to start. This is basically a town hall meeting. This is for you guys. This isn't for the board, you know, we may have to clarify some questions, but we want you, there's gonna be a short presentation on 3 items: water and storage, safe yield, and the cost analysis for the pipeline. What I'm gonna request is that we're gonna go through the presentations first. They're gonna run roughly 15 or 20 minutes. So I ask that you hold your questions to the end, because typically if we try to do questions in between each presentation, we run out of time. So try to remember, if someone wants to take my pad of paper to write questions down, so you remember, you're welcome to. But I do encourage you to keep track of what's being said and write any questions that you may have down. And then when all the presentations are over, I will open it for the public for their questions and or comments. So that's how we're going to run this meeting. I appreciate you all being here. I'm gonna go ahead and let the other board of directors make comments if they like. Again, this meeting is for you. The board of directors is here just to, and the reason we, just let you know, the reason we're using this as a special meeting, because there's 3 board of directors, there may have been more here, so we have to do it as a full meeting, not just the town hall we sit and talk to you. So with that, let me pass this down to Ryan, David, and then to Stan.
All right, good evening. I'm glad to see everybody here as well. It's important that we have this conversation and review the findings of the consultants who did their due diligence in identifying the amount of water and storage and estimating properly the amount of recharge. So thank you for participating tonight, and look forward to hearing your questions after the presentations.
All right, with that, I'll go ahead and we'll start the presentations. I'll introduce Tim Parker. He'll be doing the presentations on the groundwater storage and the safe yield. I believe, Tim, you told me there's just going to be one long presentation. Is that correct?
Right, they're gonna blend together, and it'll be close to 25 minutes or so. So 15 minutes on each topic.
Okay, thank you. With that, I'll let you get started. Thank you.
All right. Well, thank you for coming. Yeah, I'm Tim Parker, as was mentioned, and I'm a professional geologist, a licensed certified hydrogeologist, and a certified engineering geologist. Just as a matter of disclosure, I work for myself as an independent consultant under the name Parker Groundwater. I also work half-time for this Danish company called Ramboll, and in that capacity, I'm the technical director and licensed geologist on the statewide airborne electromagnetic surveys that have been conducted on all the signal basins in the state. And there's some other things I could talk about, but I won't. But welcome to you all, and I hope you find this presentation interesting. So next slide, please. So I just want to acknowledge the work of the technical working group. That is, these are the consultants that are listed under the major pumpers that have worked on this, these 2 documents that are published on the district website, as well as on the Sigma portal, and I've got a link that you can go to if you want to download them from that. I also want to recognize a company called Collier Geophysics, who supported us on the seismic reprocessing and interpretation for the basin geometry. And you'll hear more about that in the previous cooperative work. I mean, this basin's had a lot of work and a lot of investment by not only the Navy, the Bureau of Reclamation, the district, and Searles Valley Minerals, and some of that early work. So the next slide, please. And here's my outline. So I'm going to give you the answer up front in the executive summary. And I'm going to talk about some of the facts and fiction that we see. I'm going to give a little bit of a basin overview on how we understand it, and then dive into the GSP storage estimate approach and result, and the technical work group storage estimate result. The same goes for this GSP sustainable yield and the technical work group safe yield, and then final summaries. So next slide, please. So here we go. So this is what you probably have heard or seen. Just wanted to put it up front. So in the GSB, they estimate 1,750,000 acre feet of fresh water remaining in the basin. The technical work group estimate is more like 30 million acre feet in the basin. database of greater than 30, and that's fresh water. And then in terms of the basin yield estimate, the GSP estimated a sustainable yield of 7650. And the technical work group safety yield estimate is 14,300 acre feet. So with that, next slide. And I kind of use this in public meetings just to get people's attention, dispelling the myths. They aren't really myths, they're just information that we don't feel is accurate. So number one, many domestic wells are going dry. And in fact, the GSP estimated 97 by 2018 and 81 by 2030. And very few domestic well owners have come forward to claim that their well has gone dry or failed. In fact, 5 of the 5 systems. And then I don't need to diminish the domestic wells going dry. Don't get me wrong. They need to be addressed. And in fact, the state has indicated that they need to be addressed by the groundwater sustainability agencies. But what's in the groundwater sustainability plan is not what's happening in reality. There's less than 1.25 million acre feet of usable water. The basin's deep, as you'll see, and it contains a lot more water than that based on our estimates. The sustainable yield is 7650, that's under dispute. There's a newly discovered thick clay under the Navy base. You know, that thick pleistocene lacustrine clay, as you'll see in the slides, has been known about for decades, and it wasn't just discovered recently at one of the groundwater authorities. And then no new science has been applied in the work by the district. That's not right either. The new science includes collection and interpretation of its 2017 airborne electromagnetics data, the collection, or I should say the compilation of the Navy geothermal program 2D seismic reflection lines, and acquisition of additional oil and gas legacy seismic lines in the basin to characterize the deep basin geometry and in some cases the stratigraphy, and we also did some domestic well analysis. So next slide, please. So I think we all know the basin. You can see it outlined. It's kind of the, well, it's a different color in the computer than it is on that. It's not really a mustard color, but anyway. It's 600 square miles. It's a critically overdrafted basin, and it's about 8,000 feet deep. It's a half graben structure, and what that means, it's deeper on one side of the basin than it is on the other, and then the Sierra Nevada went up and the basin dropped down, filling in the sediments. We found about 1,500 parcels on domestic wells, and that doesn't include, that does not include parcels that are covered or being supplied by mutual water companies or Inyo Kern or the district. That's a lot of parcels. So that's just another little piece of information that we found. Current pumping is about 19,000 acre feet a year. And here's the list of the major pumpers. So next slide, please. I think it's worth looking at the hydrogeologic conceptual model that we developed, and you'll see why when I go into our hydrogeologic zones. So I'll ask you to remember this, at least in concept. And what I mean by the hydrogeologic conceptual model is basically it's a visual and a narrative of something hydrogeologic about the area you want to study. In this case, we're looking at the depositional environments. So Pliocene, work done by the Navy's Monastero, the Navy geothermal program. He looked at mainly the older sediments. So it's 7 to about 3.5 million years ago. That's what the basin looked like, with the Sierra Nevada going up and the basin dropping down, and these really coarse sediments coming in along the Sierra Nevada mountain range. And then you have alluvial and fluvial sediments filling the basin along with some lacustrine sediment. You move to the Pleistocene, which is about 2.5 million years ago to about 10,000 years ago. And you have glaciation with periodic melts. And what that ended up doing was having the Owens River rip through this basin, flowing a lot of water and filling it up and forming lakes. And that went all the way down to Death Valley. So you have this deposition of lake bed sediments And then you had also a sort of a delta, and so you had river channel deposit, sands and gravels depositing on the west side of those lake bed deposits. And so you end up with a thick clay. And then on the uppermost, it's Holocene, or about 10,000 years ago to present. It's your typical sort of desert basin with alluvial fans, dune sands, and plied lake deposits. So that's really things that we learned in 2001 and 2004 and 2001. This has all been out there for a while. So next slide, please. And now Tetra Tech did some work for the Navy. And this is, again, it's just to show this thick lacustrine that's lake bed deposit clay. And I don't know if you can see the lines, but that top section goes across the middle of the north portion of the basin, and then you move to the south with these other two lines. And you can see these interbedded sands in there that produce water. And so you can see that the clay does not continue all the way across the basin. And you also can note that the pumping center was a little different back then. It's changed with some of the measures the district has done. Next slide, please. And this is what's in the GSP. Unfortunately, they don't show the thick clay. They show a bunch of disconnected clays, which doesn't really agree with some of the work that's been done in the past. And so I think they're going to fix that. But anyway, that's where we're at with the sort of background on the basin sector. Now I think we're going to move into the groundwater storage estimate. So there's a difference between the way the groundwater storage estimate was done between this technical work group and in the GSP. The GSP basically used what was in the Bureau of Reclamation report that was done in 1993. And they used a 92.5 square mile area, the 600 square mile basin. Then they took that area and they multiplied it by a 200-foot saturated area. So that's water in 200 feet of the aquifer. And then they multiplied that times the specific yield. So the specific yield basically is a measure of the amount of water that will gravity drain out of a unit of the aquifer system. Typically, it's either a decimal or a percentage. And in alluvial basins, you typically get something on the order of 10 to 15%. And the results of their work was freshwater and storage in 1993 was 2,370,000 acre feet. In the GSP calculated or estimated the amount of pumping that occurred between 1993 and 2017. And it subtracted that from the 2,370,000 to come up with 1,750,000 acre feet. So that's the way that was done, and just a quick figure on that. So that's the approximate figure. Next slide. Okay. So the diagram on the left is out of the 1993 report, and the diagram on the right is where we've tried to locate it within the basin, and it's about 93 square miles, I think, is that green area. So that's the area they took. And the problem with that is there aren't slurry walls or cement barriers around that rectangle. Everything flows within the basin. When you pump, water comes in from all sides. So when you do a storage estimate, you naturally want to look at the entire basin. So next slide, please. So the technical work group took the entire basin and laid a 1 mile square grid over it, and took the area times the thickness of each hydrogeologic zone times the specific yield to come up with an estimate of 30 to 36 million acre feet. So we used a range of specific yield based on what we learned about the aquifer. So next slide, please. So here's the available data sets we used in our analysis. And everything from the E-logs on the right top to groundwater quality based on total dissolved solids to the well lithology over on the top left. And there's 7 deep monitoring wells and 3D boreholes that were done by the Navy. And then, the groundwater levels. And then finally, we used the 2017 airborne electromagnetics to help with understanding, basically connecting the dots with what we understood with the lithology. And then we used the 2D seismic reflection data to get the basin geometry, and you can see that, not sure what color those are now, but the lines in the north part of the basin are the original geothermal program wells that were done in 1992 and 2000, and then the oil and gas, the district acquired. And it was from 1982 and 1988 to map the basin geometry. Okay, the next slide. And this is what we came up with for the basin geometry. This is actually, if you will, a contour map of the thickness of the sediments, and the darker colors are where it's thicker and the lighter colors are where it's thinner. So again, you see this asymmetric basin with the deeper part of it to the west side of the basin. And next slide, please. And this is what our hydrogeologic conceptual framework report has in terms of a 3D conceptual model. We're just showing a couple of cross sections. Now, remember, I mentioned those conceptual models earlier, those three conceptual models. So the HGZ1 at the top is actually the Holocene sediments. And then the HGZ2 includes that lacustrine clay that was deposited in the Pleistocene. Then HGZ3 is an unconsolidated, and HGZ4 are consolidated sediments. HGZ4 is actually the Ricardo Group and Golar Formation. And so that's our conceptual model, and you can see there's a rise, and this is based on the seismic data, in the middle of the basin. There's a bedrock rise where it's constrained. And you can see in the lower diagram, you can really see that geometry of how deep it is on one side and shallow on the other. So next slide, please. Now, in order to come up with a good specific yield estimate, we took all the lithology logs and the geophysical logs and did some detailed analysis to come up with estimates of coarse, mixed, and fine sediments, and then determined what kind of sediments those fit for a specific yield value. Next slide, please. So that was in the shallow two zones, HG1 and 2, because the wells don't go down typically into HG3 or 4. So we use the seismic data for that. Oil and gas technology, estimated net sand and net clay. So I'm not going to dwell on it. I'm just trying to explain our methodology compared to the others. So next slide, please. And here's what we came up with. These are maps of the different HGCs with 1 mile squares with the approximate volume of acre feet of water. This is just groundwater in storage. And the bluer colors are higher. They go up to over 100,000 acre feet. And the warmer colors are lower numbers. So you can see there's a lot more water in HGC3 and HGC4, but pretty good coverage in all 4 zones. Now, next slide. The other thing we did was we looked at all the available data and made some estimates on where is the water that's under 1,000 milligrams per liter total dissolved solids, and that's what we're calling fresh water. And you can see pretty much knocks out the north part of the basin under the base where it's highly saline, but you can still see there's quite a bit of good stored water there that's fresh. So next slide, please. And that's how we came up with the greater than 30 million. You can see we have a range there from 29 to 36 million based on a range of specific yields. So that's how we did the storage estimate. You might get that number. And now we'll move to the take a breath and move to the sustainable yield estimate. And this is what the groundwater sustainability plan has in terms of how they did the safe yield estimate. you kind of have to dig into some of the documents. A lot of this is described in the 2016 McGraw model report. First, they used something called a brute force recharge model, which is a highly simplistic empirical model to distribute rainfall and come up with a range of the amount of recharge in the basin. Then they distributed that recharge into a 2D groundwater flow model based on data from 1973 and ended up with 5,250 acre feet a year. And then they included Rose Valley interbasin flow of 2,400 acre feet a year to come up with 7,650. Now, as we understand it, we've asked for the model over the years and have never received it. We've asked for the work behind these estimates and haven't seen it, but as we understand it, they use that 7,658 feet a year set as a constant to construct and calibrate their 3D flow model. And that's just the recharge. So anyway, that's the way the GSP did the sustainable yield estimate. Now let's move on to the technical work group. The technical work group actually did a complete literature review and synthesis of basin recharge over the years. And we did eliminate very high numbers and very low numbers. I think there were a couple that were over 30,000, which we felt weren't defensible. But we came up with this range of 6,600 to 22,000, making an average of about 14,000 acre feet a year. Now, curiously, Kern County contracted with the USGS under a state-funded grant to use something called the basin characterization model to estimate the recharge in the basin. And it's interesting because that came up with 8,700 acre feet per year. That doesn't include any type of incidental recharge. It's just looking at precipitation distribution in the basin and accounting for the geology, the soils, the vegetation. So they did a very rigorous analysis, and that's what they came up with. Now, we did also a compilation and quality assured and quality controlled the best available pumping and water level data sets. And then what we did to actually do the analysis was application of what we call Tyson polygons, which is a well-known method. And in fact, to estimate the storage change annually, and it's being used by the GSP in their annual report. So we use the storage change estimate, and you see one way to calculate the safe yield is simply by taking the pumping plus or minus the storage change on an average annual basis. And you'll see what I mean when I say average annual basis. So let's go to the next slide. So again, a change in storage is the area times the specific yield. Remember that term, it's gravity draining water times the water level change. And it's, again, the same approach in the annual reports. But to actually do it, you don't want to just look at 1 year, you want to look at what we call a hydrologic base period. And you have to do a little bit of analysis for that. And then you have sort of an average pumping over plus or minus an average change in the storage. So let's go to the next slide. And here's what a cumulative departure and annual precipitation curves looks like. So the vertical axis is the annual precipitation. The horizontal axis goes from 1945 to 2023. And you can see how the precipitation has changed over the years. And that's from the NA, the Naval Station on base at China Lake. So that's where it's collected. Now that funny green line, that's what's called a cumulative departure curve. And when it's going down, it means that you're seeing drier hydrology, less precipitation than the average. And when it goes up, it's wetter. And you can see there's a cycle going on there. And you know what's interesting about this cycle is that last drop, that whole last drop from the top, we're seeing that throughout the Southwest. It's a drier climate in the Southwest of the US. Now, we picked a base period of 10 years. There's a reason for that. We could have gone longer, but as you go longer in time, we found that the pumping data was more uncertain. And in fact, what we used for most of the pumping data was what was reported to the court recently. So these are pumpers that reported their pumping data and indicated how they reported it. So we used that last 10-year period, and you can see there were a couple of really wet years and then quite a few dry years. So that's, I guess I'll go to the next slide. Now, specific yield distribution, there's a couple of things going on here. I'm not sure you can see the polygons. It's a little bit dark, but we have an example in the next slide. So these are three different distributions of specific yield. And so you'll see on the left is the GSP model, and I guess you'll have to trust me on this. The darker colors are higher specific yield, and basically the nearly average specific yield across the whole basin in the GSP model is about 0.22. Brown and Caldwell did a model in 2009, and then the Rambo Hydrogeologic Conceptual Framework did a lot of work to try to determine the specific yield distribution across the basin. And you can see those are much lighter. Those are more on the order of, well, 0.12 to 0.15. Now, the interesting thing about that is there's a direct correlation between safe yield and specific yield. So the higher the specific yield, the lower the safe yield. And so that's one of the reasons we think that there are some issues with the old model. And the polygons distributed there are modified by the technical work group to include a larger area of the basin. So next slide. And here again shows this difference in the specific yield distribution, this time by polygon. So the blue and green lines are actually the Ramble and the Brown and Caldwell lines, and you can see they're quite a bit lower than the specific yield distribution by Tyson polygon in the GSP model. So next slide, please. And so this is the polygons that we constructed to cover actually the model domain area that Ramble was working on, the groundwater flow model. And the way you construct these, it's an automated GIS system. And you basically, you have a well, you have a series of wells, and then you create the polygons to be evenly distributed around the well points. And there's a little difference in the way we're doing our analysis. We're using the pure Tyson polygon method, whereas in the GFC annual reports, they've modified it to actually use more than one well, in some cases contouring water levels, I understand. And that kind of, I just don't know if that's appropriate. In any case, we applied the measured spring to spring annual change in groundwater level times the specific yield, remember what that term means, and then times the polygon area for a volume in each one of those polygons. Next slide, please. And this shows the results of our analysis. So this is another graph. So the graph acre feet on the left, and you can see it goes from minus 25 to plus 35. And that's so that we can squeeze in both the minus change in storage plus the pumping. So that line on the top is the pumping by year, and there are 10 years here. So you see the groundwater pumping goes from about 30,000 acre feet to 19,000 acre feet. Now those squares below represent the storage change by year. For the blue is the Brown and Caldwell, and the green is the Ramble model. And so that's the plot of what the data looks like. And then we did the calculation again, it's safe yield equals pumping minus the change in storage. The next slide, please. And this is what this looked like when it's actually calculating the safe yield over time. And so it's actually the yield of the basin for each year, and then you average that to come up with the totals. So those dotted lines represent the average of the safe yield estimate for the Brown and Caldwell at 17,000 acre feet and 14,300 acre feet for the Rainbow model. So I think that pretty well covers it. Next slide. And here it is in a table. So we plotted these in a table. We're going with the Ramble methodology because it's pure and it uses the Tyson methodology strictly. And that's where we're at. And so one more slide, I think. Oh, references, that's right. So I have some references in the slide for your interest. That Epstein, which also included Greg Bull, who did the model, is the development and uncertainty analysis of the empirical recharge, the basically root force bootstrap, if you're interested in learning about that. And next slide, and that's the summary. So that's what I have, and there's the link for the portal if you want to go to that to get it. So how did I do on time?
Let me see. You passed.
Okay.
You did really good. It's just a, you know,
There was
almost
a lot of
30,
information to cover, and it was a fire of information.
almost 30 minutes. Okay.
Okay, thank you, the microphone. Thank you, Jim. My name is George Kroll. I'm the general manager of the Water District. I guess I'll give a little background. I worked with the Environmental Protection Agency in Washington, D.C. for a number of years. I ran an environmental program at the Vandenberg Air Force Base. I became the Public Works Director at Vandenberg Air Force Base, where I ran a base that had both wells and was connected to the state water project. So I think those are some of the reasons. I did a bunch of other stuff. These are some of the reasons I'm here to do. So today I'm going to talk about costs. Let's fast forward. I think there's a bunch of slides that were back of the slides. So we'll have to run through those. Keep going. And another slide. Okay, so back one. There we go. So what am I here to talk about? What is it that I'm talking about with costs? So all that stuff that Tim just said, if I could summarize it, water and storage is important because it gives you time to solve the problem. And we need to stay right up front. Water district doesn't believe there's not a problem. We recognize that the water level in the basin is dropping today. It needs to be solved. It needs to be under sustainability. Well, not a recharge is not a safe deal is important because that's how much water at the end of the day we're going to be able to pump plus whatever water we can generate in the valley or import into the valley. And that's what we're going to have to live with to be sustainable. So our big issue, in one sense, is that when you look at the groundwater authority's 7650 number, it really sort of leads you to a path that, you know, even if all the farming goes away, and, you know, we all reduce water and save water, they still need to bring this really expensive pipeline into the valley. And there's, you know, they will tell you there's no other way to solve that problem. Our view is that there are other ways doing multiple things to solve this problem. So I'm going to talk about one of the specific aspects, which is if they build this pipeline, what's it going to cost you as a resident of the Indian Wells Valley or a resident or a customer of the water district on your water bill or your taxes? And that's what we're doing. So this pipeline, we'll talk about how much it's going to cost. Well, I need to say that we hired Clean Energy Capital. They're on the line today. If you have any questions for them, you can ask David there. They're a certified public utility financial institution. They go around, they do cost estimating for these large projects. And we had them come in and we said, we want you to look at the whole project. And I'll describe what that means on the next slide. So one thing I want to start out by saying is we don't disagree with the groundwater authority's assessment of what the pipeline itself costs. They say it's roughly $200 million. We don't disagree that they're going to get $150 million from the federal government. They'll pay for it. What we found in our study is that there were a lot of other costs.
George, I just want to let you know, I got a text that when you're speaking on that, it cuts out quite a bit, as opposed to when Tim was at the podium, it was very clear.
Well,
So-
let me switch it up.
Yeah, switch it up. I know you like to walk around, but we want to make sure everybody hears everything out there. Yeah, that's on wheels.
Let's see. Let's see if this is better. Okay, so, let's get my head back together. There we go. So what we found out is that there's a lot of costs in addition to the cost of pipeline. There's the cost of purchasing water rights to put water in the pipeline. There's cost of modification to our system. There's construction management costs, water hauling costs, development costs, and a lot of other things that need to be added to that so that we can get to the full project cost. And so in my house, we sort of break it down into the project, which is the pipeline plus modifying our system, plus all the other things that need to be done, the water rights, and then there's this operations and maintenance, which what it costs every year to run the pipeline, what we would have to pay every year, from now until kind of forever. Next slide. Okay. So what is the sort of assumption here? The assumption is that we as the water district are the only entity in the valley to have paid the replenishment fee. This is the large fee that the GA pays everyone. So for this analysis, we're just gonna say, we believe, we're gonna comment on what other people might or may not do in the future or what might happen. We're just gonna say that since we're the only one paying today, this representation today is what would happen if the water district continued to be the only entity paying for this pipeline. Next slide. Okay, so now we have to read all these numbers. Let's see. So the project costs, I'm gonna run through it. It looks like you have this $200 million project. You subtract out the well, I'm gonna have to move this over so I can read the slides. Actually, it'd be better off just grab my slides. Give me just a second so I get these numbers right. Let's see if I can get these numbers right. The total project cost, this is sort of a construction cost that we talked about. 285 million. So you take 150 million, and subtract from that another 10 million, which is nothing for design. So you subtract 160 million from that, and you're down to 125 million you still owe on the project. And then you say, well, we got to pay for that, not today, but at some point in the future, pursuant to the GA, but they say that's going to happen about 2028 to 2030. You sort of escalate this cost of 2028, it's about 185 million. And then you have to finance that over 30 years at a 4% rate, and so what happens when you do all that math, you end up with about $19 billion a year in annual cost to pay for this pipeline, which is quite a bit. Then, so when you take that math, and you say, well, what's that gonna be? We had, and took that and divided it over 20,000 parcels in the valley, that'd be about $950 in taxes on each parcel, or it could be $125 a month if you just split that amongst the 12,500 water district customers. So, then there's the O&M. And the O&M at $10 million a year, if you divide that amongst the 12,500 customers of the water district, that's about another $66 a month. And those numbers are pretty concerned. That's a pretty big hit on your line. So if we go to the next slide. There we go. So in sort of plain English, we're going to look at a couple different scenarios, the way these costs can be broken out. So the first one is this: you get $950 per year in taxes and another $66 a month on your water bill. And that's sort of assumed we put the construction on the tax base, we put the O&M on your water bill. And these are big numbers, that's what we're worried about. Scenario two is about $190 a month. If we just put every bit of that money on a water district customer, so if you take the whole amount and divide it by 12,500, then the last one is, let's see, if you sort of took the water district's budget and you said, well, what is the budget today? This is what the budget would look like. We pay for that all in the future. You would essentially be more than doubling your water bill for everybody. So take your water bill, whatever it is today, and do a little bit more than double it. So the bottom line on the last slide is a recommendation. So, we think these are excessive cost for this community. We think it's important to look at other alternatives. I think the board has resolved in a declaration that we should oppose the pipeline, and that's one of the reasons we held this workshop today. And I believe that is the end of my presentation, and it's time for Ron to let it lead us into public comments.
All right, thank you. I'm hoping the public out there can hear me, because I understand this microphone may not be as clear as it breaks up. So with that, I'm going to ask that the public, if they have any questions, to please come forward and ask them. We'll get them. We'll try to get them answered as you ask the question. I think it's important you both leave here with an understanding. I truly encourage that. So the best place for you to be heard and recorded would be at the podium. I was hoping we could do it with the microphone, but evidently it's great enough for the people that are watching us on TV. So if anybody has a question, just please come to the podium and we'll direct it to the correct responder.
I just saw a bunch of interesting data. And in most data sets that I'm familiar with, you look for trends. And I didn't see anything in these bar graphs that showed anything having to do with trends, and that's my question. Did you see any trends in your data collection?
I guess that question's for you, Tim.
What kind of trends are you looking for? Well, the old time, the horizontal would be time, and the vertical one would be anything. But what I was looking for was trends. Is it going up? Is it going down? Is it moving? And that's what I was hoping to see here. That I'm not questioning your data. I'm saying, how about a little more analysis? And the issue would be over time, and you've got a lot of data there that's old and young, and I think something would come out of this if you took a look at that parameter.
Tim, I believe, can you answer that question? Do you understand what we're looking for here?
Yeah, one of the things I think that's helpful to do is actually look at the hydrologic graphs, the hydrographs in the wells, and you see some trends there in terms of the declines. The one trend you certainly see here is the pumping is going down, right? So it's decreased by what 30 minus I don't know, 36, 11,000 feet a year. So the trends in the storage change is not clear. So that's a matter of how those wells are responding in each one of those polygons, and that's why you want to use a variety of years to average those out. So that's what I guess I would say in terms of
Maybe trends of what would happen over time, how much the water would decline over 5 and 10 years.
You know, we aren't prepared to do that quite yet with calibrating a new model based on this data, and that's when we'll be looking at that and we'll have more better information to talk about. That should be done in the next couple of months.
All right, thank you. Next.
Dr. Inman and Richcrest City Council and Vice Chair of the Groundwater Authority. So I have a question. Is the sustainable yield numbers that you are referring to based on a completed model? And if not, how can those numbers be correct?
Can you speak closer to the microphone? Your throat up.
Yeah, I said, our water district sustainable yield amount numbers based on a completed groundwater model. If not, how are they accurate?
This is a question for Tim, please, on model.
Let me clarify.
Okay, hang on, we're going to clarification here.
Now, I just have a clarification on a couple of slides that was presented by the general manager of the water district.
The work done by the technical working group was to establish a safe yield, not a sustainable yield as, Mr. Hayman's referring to it. And, the safe yield assessment is a standalone document, with or without the model. Tim's been correct.
Oh, no, yeah, Tim, I would like you to address where we are with the model, and what's expected of it. This is the model that is actually being calibrated right now.
Right. So there are many ways to estimate safe yield and sustainable yield in a basin, but in particular, safe yield. And Jim, did you want to?
The sustainable yield versus safe yield, it's ongoing, it's an ongoing dispute with litigation. So we're here to talk about the report and not to try to distinguish the two. We're not going to do that.
Right, no, and I'm not intending to do that. So there are a number of ways, this just happens to be one method to estimate the safe yield in a basin. And as you know, it's the same, we're using the groundwater storage change, just like it's being done in the GSP. So it's a valid method. Now, in terms of having a groundwater flow model, I believe you're talking about a groundwater flow model that's being developed and it's in the process of being calibrated. We're bringing in the best pumping data from the various parties to make sure we have the best data we can for this. So again, that's in the process of being calibrated, and it will be turned over, I believe, sometime to the courts at some point. So with that, in all fairness, then I see it, using the term myth and mythology for the data that is being presented from the GA, but yet, from what I understand here then is that your methodology and estimation of data is not based on a completed model. Is that correct?
I believe the model
It is progress.
So the model is completely there, so it's calibrated, yeah.
So we agree on that, and so with that, how should that data be
Tim, any more than a myth? Tim, we need to clean this up again and explain why the data's good.
So because if that's true, then this is an uncompleted model, and this data is just estimations based on your assessment, then it's unfair to say that other data have been looked at scientifically from the GA and many well-documented scientific based studies of people that's methodology. So I think it's unfair to label it. So I'm okay with the model not being completed and data that you're going to put out. But let's be fair across the board. So the other thing is, well, in my viewpoint, then it is an estimate of information at this point in time. And that's what we really consider that. If we go back to a couple slides back that the general manager had gone over on the estimates of cost for the end of the year. So if we look at these numbers, I think this is kind of doomsday and scare tactic here, because if we look at the financial for 30 years, 4% for the estimated inflation, for the estimated inflation from 2023 to 2028 was $185 million. Rough calculation's been, that's a 33% inflation cost over 5 years. That doesn't seem to be a reasonable estimate. The other thing is, the water district had opportunity when it comes to some of these costs. They could have looked at the water that they needed to supplement. They could have launched that water out years back when this was brought up and could have saved the ratepayers a substantial amount of money when water rates were low. And then they could have purchased water, which would have saved some of this money. So I have some issues with some of these estimations under the very top line. I mean, basically it says total project cost equal project construction, which you guys have inflated, and plus water district system is model. I see no numbers to accurately calculate that, and water rights for a total of 285 million, but you don't line item it out. You don't have let's say a very definitive calculated number to correlate with that. So basically, I see this as, yes, there'll be costs incurred with the new water project, but not based on what I'm seeing in this, this estimation here. So those numbers could have been substantially lower, based on other factors and those are through the groundwater authority. So.
So, yeah, I'd really like to say thank you. That is an amazing task because when we started developing our process, and we went to the groundwater authority, we said, hey, you know, develop the process, and you please work with us. And, we got nothing. Once we had the report done, the draft report, he gave it to the groundwater authority and said, will you please go over these numbers with us and help us get them as accurate as possible, and we have constantly spread over. There you go. And nobody else, nobody came up with groundwater, nobody sat down with us. That report has been out for months. The invitation is open to this day. Anytime anyone wants to come down and talk those numbers and discuss and refine them, we would love them to be the best numbers they could possibly be. And we welcome the input of the groundwater authority into doing that. But we're gonna put the numbers up there that we can come up with the best that we can without the assistance of the groundwater authority. So thanks for that question, and I certainly hope this inspires us to work together.
George, can I have my?
Oh, yeah. Thank you, George. I'm not gonna say everything on my own expression, but, I will remind you that you have the, director from the water system that's on the DA board, Dan Cannon, and should report in that to the time. The copy of the report there,
Okay, I want to address one thing, Scott, that you said about the district financing the $25 million replenishment fee. That was never an alternative. We determined from the very beginning that would not be possible because we had to keep our borrowing capability available for any outcome that may cause us to do a capital investment, which you have seen in the Northwest Pipeline. What I'm saying is, if we had financed that, we wouldn't have been able to get money to do the Northwest Pipeline. That was what we were looking at. We were looking at the financial health of the district and keeping our options open when capital money was needed. So it was never an idea that we could ever finance that 25 million bonded out. Now, the GA can bond it out if they wanted to, but we weren't able to.
which kind of leads me, I guess, to another topic, the cost of this litigation that the water district has brought onto itself. Do you have an estimate for how much those costs have incurred to this point and the future costs and what that's going to cost for repairs?
I think you'll see that with the cost study that we're doing, that's going to be published online as requested of the board. When we're talking about looking at cost studies, that we break that out, and our finance department is going to make that available. It'll probably be, I'm not sure when, but probably very shortly, and it should be in the cost analysis that's going to be online. On the district page.
Since you did bring this up about the credit, I have another question. And this may be more for energy capital. But what is the credit worthiness of the water district? How much available credit does it have? And what is the cost per ratepayer or per person in the district? And how long will the plan be financed?
I'm not sure what you're asking. We're financially sound. We're working on rate studies now to ensure our capability for financing or bonding, but I'm not sure what your final part of the question was. I don't know if I misunderstood you or didn't hear you.
No, I mean, you answered a bit of it, but, so it's a question and concern that I have. Where the water district sits and its credit worthiness and being able to handle projects, it's going to be
Very good. So if you can, like, if you don't mind stepping, I'm going to hang on to this.
So what we recommend, we have either an A or a double A credit rating, so, yeah, we achieved one of the lower finance rates. In a recent project we did, with a related topic, we're adjusting our rates so that we can have rates for the order in the future, and the water district is in actually very good financial shape, and I have to say the water district infrastructure is in really great shape compared to many of the systems I've worked on and seen, and we want to keep it that way, and that's the goal of the water district, to do it in an affordable way as we possibly can. So we're gonna make sure that we both maintain our credit rating, have the ability to borrow in case of emergency, we have a tremendous reserve in case we need it. So I think we're very healthy with that.
If I may, I'd like to address something that Dr. Hayden said. So regarding the GSP sustainable yield, it's actually a recharge number. From what we understand, it's a recharge number that was estimated using a series of steps, and that recharge number was fixed when the model was calibrated, was constructed and calibrated. So the rest of the model was built around that recharge number. And that's one of the issues we have with it, is that we've never seen the model. We've never seen the work behind how they came up with the recharge number, so we don't know. But I just wanted to make that point when you're talking about groundwater flow model.
Yeah,
Thank you.
quick question about that.
That question in March, I didn't see it on the data, but does that take into effect the development transpiration?
Yeah.
You know, could you speak directly to the mic?
Yeah, my question was whether or not, 14,000 took into effect the evapotranspiration of the valley to the vegetation. Good question.
Yeah, no, that's a very good question. It's a very simplistic approach because it's simply looking at the amount of pumping versus the change in storage over time. So it accounts for that.
Okay, doesn't have to necessarily be a question, maybe a statement? How long do I have?
You can make a statement if you like, but we're gonna get, you have time, so.
Okay, one question, are you guys familiar with the Water Education Foundation? It's a Sacramento, I believe they're located in Sacramento.
I see a big nod going on behind you, yes.
You are? Okay, so Jennifer Gold, okay, so here's the problem I have, Mr. Heyman mentioned about, the tax, the scare tactics, but I'm kind of concerned about the association with the Water Education Foundation. So, apparently Stantec is also, Lisa Butler was the one that facilitated the Indian Wells groundwater meetings before.
Yeah.
My concern with that is that she's involved with Stantec, which is involved with the Water Education Foundation, which is involved with the United Nations. So it's gonna be hard for me. I've been in the ethics for like 10 years, so I don't need to be jumping around, so.
Excuse me, this is really out of our jurisdiction for this meeting.
Okay, but my thing is, okay, so he's coming up with this data and stuff, but I'm thinking, you guys mentioned Rose Valley. Also, they're still, LA is still trying to drill in Rose Valley. They were trying to fight that, and, so I don't know how well they're doing with that.
We're not addressing that here.
Okay. Well, anyway, so anybody wants to talk to me about some of the things that have been going on with the groundwater authority, anything, get with me later, because there's more to it than just, I appreciate you guys' work and all that, but there's more to the formation of Indian Wells Valley Groundwater Authority and those who were involved in, setting it up and everything, so, okay.
So I can sum that up, there's a bigger issue involved with everything going on in the city and so forth.
Right, and
If people would like to know more about that, they should talk to you directly.
yeah, exactly, because some of the data that coming up with this, the people involved in giving them this data has other motives, so with their studies and all that stuff, if you know who's involved, like, for instance, Stinson.
We have to press it, that's just getting out of our area,
Okay.
so thank you very much for the comment, and, I'll hang on at the meeting so people can find you.
Okay.
All right, thank you very much.
Yeah, state your name, please.
Hi. Mr. Worth, this question is for you. Can you explain, the Prop 218 and, how it was voted on and what those dollars were specifically for?
Which Prop 218 talking about?
The replenishment fee.
The original one.
The original Prop
We have
218.
this question for Jim here. Okay.
Yeah, I think it might be a legal question. So, and then, if any of as I understand it, was to buy a right of water, not water, but the right to buy water. And where do we sit with that today?
So this is getting a little bit further away from where we are. I'll just say this, the replenishment fee was enacted pursuant to Prop 218. The purpose was twofold. There was the fee that's 2,130 feet, 1750 an acre foot, goes to mitigate shallow wells. The remaining portion, 211250, whatever that is, goes to purchase imported water. I wouldn't make a distinction about imported water versus water rights. It's clear that it's to purchase water and bring into the valley. That is the purpose of the replenishment fee. And I think that's a fair characterization.
It's the right to purchase water. It's table A, right? Jim?
It's table A.
So it's not purchasing water, it's purchasing table A water right.
Purchasing the right to receive. I could say it in different ways, but it's basically purchasing a right to table a state water project, water. Like a lot of people have. Right.
Judy Decker, since you're talking about the replenishment fee, I believe it's listed as such on our water bills. But is it not on our water bills, not only the replenishment fee, but the water district's portion of the pumping fee?
Yeah, I believe that what you see on your bill is a combination, I've looked at this before, of the replenishment fee as both the pumping fee. It's a one-line item for GA pass-through.
Right, well, people may know that, they're
Right.
also paying their share of the pumping fee. And now I have a question for you, Kim. The question is, you, I assume that's the correct pronunciation, polynomials, you have one well per polygon. What were your what was the criteria used for choosing each well?
The criteria used was, number one, that it's, not, it's screened across an appropriate zone, and that, there's a reasonable amount of history. So we have an idea of the trend in that well. And looking at other wells in the area to see how those wells also treated. And that it's also looking forward to see how old it is. Now, we had to use what we could at the same time, especially over in the El Paso area. As you know, there aren't many wells over there. So it's not perfect, but it's the approach that we took, and we think we got reasonable results with it, reasonable estimate. Does that help?
The future of water supply in the North Valley isn't just the amount of water, it's the change in the quality of water, which is declining over time.
Thank you.
My question is kind of a general over picture on this thing. Is the model or the study that we're doing right now, which I find the numbers very interesting, are they leading to a direction where we might have an impact to the position the state is, where we're in a critical overdraft? And will this be also leading to maybe other recommendations for solving the solution other than the pipeline?
I can actually answer that one. My hope is that when we use this new scientific data, when we use the Ramble model, when we use this analysis, that if we can agree that the safe fuel is in the 14,000 range, and the pumping now, as we see, is down to 19,000 acre feet a year, then I would hope that we could take this scientific data calculation analysis to the state and maybe get off the critical list. That's a possibility. I don't know what's involved. Tim could probably know more of that. He deals with DWR all the time. But if we start looking at that and we come off the critical list, and then we're looking at, don't forget that 19,000 included all the major farms. When in fact, the farming is looking at leading between 2035 and 2040. And if you look at the actual pumping that is non-agricultural of that 19,000, it's roughly 11,000. So you see what I'm saying with the numbers there. If we're pumping around 11,000 and we 14,000 in safe field, then the possibility that we can come off the list as a critical overdrafted basin. But we have to prove that. That's the main thing. Tim, do you have anything to add to that? Or?
Yeah, I think the main thing is becoming sustainable, so that, we'll have some wells going down, coming up as the seasonal changes occur and as the hydrology changes, but overall it's sustainable. That's our goal. And there are some alternatives out there to increase on the water supply side and reduce the demand further. So there are some alternatives that we can look at through scenario model.
And thank you for that comment, because that's part of it too. Even though we may come off a critical list, we would continue with the monitoring of the basin to see that we are sustainable. I think that's probably the main thing. Thank you, Tim. Next.
Hi, I have a couple questions. Earlier in the presentation.
Could you state your name?
Oh, sorry, Christine Weiser. Earlier in the presentation, you had mentioned that it was a town hall, but I noticed that we're in the USO building. Is there a reason we're not in City Hall for this meeting?
Okay, well, George, you don't mind answering about the emails going back and forth, and then we actually have people here from City Hall that don't answer that.
Yeah, we requested the City Hall for this meeting, and we were told we couldn't have this until after the election. Couldn't have the City Hall chamber until after the election for reasons I can't explain.
Anybody from the City Hall like to give a reason? I'm sure that she would like that. If not, it's okay too.
I'll gladly answer that.
Would you go?
No, I won't. You guys went to the public meeting, stated you wanted to make this an election issue. Don't do this. Just.
I'm not sure where you have that, but that's.
I'm correct.
You're correct.
So we can leave it there.
Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah, I was just asking because I heard town hall earlier and with the other part of it, so the IWB Water District, I'm guessing, is opposing the groundwater authority. My own curiosity, why do you guys collect the fee if you're not for it?
I'll let Jim answer that.
It's a volumetric fee based on the amount of water that's pumped. We pump the water, that we have to pay the replenishment fee, so we put it on our bill. It's procedural, and it's probably the most efficient way to have it done. There's no requirement, but it's the way it's done.
I just was generally asking. I actually don't have a water service account with IWB. I have a lot of friends and family that do those, so they show me their bills, so I was just curious why it was on there. And on the probable cause slide that you guys had, did we ever get I'm guessing that slide was from your fees, or your research, but did the groundwater authority ever give one? Yeah.
George, I need you to answer that.
No, the groundwater authority, as I stated before, they did a really good estimate that we believe to be reasonably accurate for the pipeline itself. But what we wanted to understand was what was the full cost of the project. And we did ask them to cooperate, and that didn't didn't occur, so we went forward with that. I think that's an integral part of any project, especially a big public works project, is to really understand how it's going to impact the economy of the local area, our customers, and so we just went ahead and did it because we felt it was the right thing to do for our customers, even though we didn't get a lot of support from the groundwater.
Yeah, I want to add that, basically what you're asking, that's an economic impact report as much as anything else, which we believe is absolutely necessary in any project of this size. What is the economic impact to the community? And that's what that included.
Okay, now kind of piggybacking off of that, I see that you guys have the slide actually up where it says there's 20,000 parcels in IWB. Can you clarify, is that residential, commercial, and does that include the Navy or just, in IWB at what level does that include? In your current or just Ridgecrest?
That's just a rough estimate. It might be closer to 21 or 22,000, but it does not include the Navy. The Navy does not pay property taxes. It includes the roughly 20,000 APNs that are, we believe, within the boundaries of the basin. So anybody that lives in and sort of gets water out of the basin, it might be a little, when you're looking at these costs, as an engineer, you want to have it, accurate to a 5 decimal, but we round things off to 20,000 or so, just because there's so much uncertainty in all of it. We're just trying to get the general sense of what it is, but that would be sort of spread across people in the earnings. When I say that it could be a $900 tax, that would be pretty much anybody who's in the
Yeah, and the reason why I asked, because I saw that earlier in the slides, it had mentioned there was a list of people who were the major pumpers, and I saw Navy was listed there, so I just thought it was kind of intriguing that Navy was listed as a big pumper, but they're not going to associate any of the fees since they don't have a parcel. I know, that's how this question.
The Navy is exempt, we observe. Groundwork Authority has no authority over the Navy. That's right, it's like that.
But if maybe bridge and the top, a significant part of the cost of pipeline and maintenance, there's a recognition that a significant part of the population of Ridgecrest is now Navy personnel. And so what I'm suggesting and asking is totally reasonable. I think the Navy absolutely should be paying a significant part of the money that is necessary for the pipeline. The second thing I've got, I was going to talk something about the Randall and the model. With Jim here, we could have had quite a discussion, I think. I'm actually Dr. Decker, and physics is my background. And we could have spent a night here. The thing I'm going to bring up is that we are very, very late coming to the realization that we have a serious water shortfall problem. In 1971, Thomas Stetson, who was the founder of Stetson Engineers, the current engineering firm for the GA, he was contracted to do a study for California City. This is Fremont Basin. And he did that and came up with a number of around 30,000 acre feet per year as the annual recharge. The problem is that the wells in the area were declining and had been declining for a long time, going to a point per year. So the whole thing was discussed and in short order, say this, St. Juan was with its dad, they were the principles. That said, The Fremont Basin is basically a closed cemented basin, just like this basin is. And their number came out to something on the order of 6,000 acre feet per year. The numbers may not be quite right. But that's a thing. That's 30 years ago. Approached the state to bring it for the water to Cal City. Here we are at this late date, still fooling around, trying to figure out how we're going to pay for this or that, instead of looking at the bigger picture. That is, how on earth are we going to survive on a relatively low level of recharge? The groundwater model that the GA has right now, if you look at it carefully, has overemphasized the recharge. And it doesn't include the 2,000 acre feet lost at the phreatic zone on the base. So we've got a number of issues here, and I'm just pointing this out. I don't think there are very many people in this audience who were aware that California City went through this exact same struggle 30 years ago. They didn't mess around, however. They got on with it. And if we done the same thing here, I think it was Mr. Haven that pointed this out. If we had gotten with it at a earlier point in time, we wouldn't be struggling so much with the cost. Thank you.
Next, please.
This is kind of.
Please speak for the microphone.
My name's Donna Walters.
Thank you.
This is my first meeting, so my question is probably very elementary. But I saw that there was a lot of conflict in the room about this portable cost for item baby residents. So I don't know if the GA can answer this question. I don't know if there can be some sort of understanding. When you guys put the numbers up there, it's an estimate based off of, using the clean energy or clean capital energy. And that's an estimate, I understand. But it could also be inflated and things like that. When the gentleman came up here and said it was inflated, my question is to you, but it's also to you. I don't know if you can answer it. Again, what is the percentage of you thinking that is inflated? Do you guys say, you know, we might be off by 20%? Are you saying it's inflated by 20%? What is as an investor in this community, some of you grew up here, I understand scare tactics, but I need to understand as a property owner, if I'm looking at multiple things, can you give a general estimate on where the inflated part is coming from on your side and their side? I don't know if they can.
Sure.
I know you can, and I know yours is probably gonna be a positive. I'd love to hear, because the question was brought up. So I'd love to hear both sides.
Jared, is clean energy capital on the line? If they're on the line, they might be able to answer that.
They could be on the line, Jason.
Are they? Yep. And who is it?
David.
David? Oh, I hear him.
Go ahead, David.
Yeah, hi everyone. I'm not sure I heard what the question was sharply.
How confident are you of your numbers and any possible inflation, or how conservative are they or how not conservative? That's, I think someone's looking. So if you come up with a number, is plus side by 10%, is basically how did you come up with those estimates?
Yeah, well, our detailed study is posted on the district's website. It's under groundwater sustainability, and there's a lot of detail to the short presentation that was given tonight. An element, I think that there was a comment that the escalation rate was high between now and 2028, and factors such like that cumulatively will certainly impact our cost estimates, but they would impact it maybe on the order of 25% plus or minus. We calculated cost of water ranging from $4,000 an acre foot to nearly $20,000 an acre foot. Those are reasonable estimates of the all-in cost as was described tonight, including operations and maintenance, water cost, water rights acquisition, downstream and upstream facilities. We have a high degree of confidence that we have estimated an order of magnitude accurate cost. And we also have invited the Groundwater Authority to make comments. And if we've got an input that we should vary in order to test its impact, that's math. That's straightforward math. But the estimates that we provided for planning purposes for a project at this stage are, we think, best practices are for a cost of a new project estimates.
Yeah, and I'd just like to add, we went out of our way in this study, and David, hopefully you can confirm this, to use groundwater authority numbers where they were available. So we used their cost for the pipeline. We didn't say, oh, the pipeline was estimated too high. We just said, yeah, we accept that. We also used their estimate, how much money they would get from the federal government to offset those costs. As David said, there's a level of uncertainty. The other thing I've noticed, are there other entities that could help pay for this cost? There are. We can't speak for them. Right now, there's only one entity paying the groundwater authority essentially, and that is the water district. There may be a couple other small entities, the intercurrent might pay them a little bit, but we sort of say right now we're the only one paying, and if that's what happens in the future, this is the way the cost will fall. Is it possible that other entities can step up and pay? It certainly is, but we can't speak for them.
I have a quick question though, because it brought up is that supposedly, I didn't say that there's been no estimate done by a water district of cost to hook to our system. When in fact, I believe Freeman Stewart did. I don't get those numbers with you, Travis. But I thought they were in the $25 to $30 million range. Can you clarify if you can?
That's correct. So I'm Travis Romaine, Assistant District Consulting Engineer with Krieger and Stewart. And I can shed some light on the first part of that question, the top line, the $285 million. The pipeline cost estimate by the GA is $200 million. We've gone through that, and that is within the range that we were anticipating, so we don't have any arguments there. They set aside an additional $12 million for parcel acquisition. That seems reasonable considering pipeline's about 50 miles long going through the desert. And then that leaves about $70 million to get to that $285 million. About half of that is district improvements to the system. Where the pipeline is proposed to be terminating into the district system is at the Ridgecrest Heights Reservoir, which will essentially make all of the water in the system flow the opposite way of what it currently does. And when you have that, you have to size pipes differently to be able to reach the extents of the system. You have to deal with aging infrastructure, leaks, things like that when you have all those changes. And the rest of that increase up to the 285 is for the water rights purchase, the last item in that little equation that's listed for getting the water rights to be able to get the water to the pipeline to start pumping. And one thing to note on that is the reliability of the state water project in particular is only around 45% of what the water rights that you purchase. So you have to over-purchase that quantity of water in order to get the amount that you want. So those are the different components that come up into that $285 million on that top line.
Yeah, additionally and not insignificantly, the water from the state water project is considered to be surface water. And what we're doing currently is we're mining groundwater, and those require different handling. The chemicals used to sanitize groundwater are different than the ones used to sanitize surface water, and they do not mix well together. In fact, they produce toxic elements. So we have to put in a plant that would take the water and treat it properly so we can mix it into our system without causing a problem.
Okay, thank you. Next, please.
My name is Ann Smithson. We recently bought some property here in Ridgecrest, and so a lot of this is new. Although I've heard snippets over time since we've lived in the area for a decade and a half. But two questions I had is, one, where's the pipeline water coming from? And two, you mentioned something about incidental recharge, and I wondered what that was.
I guess it's come from Antelope Valley, basically 50 miles.
I can tackle it too. So immediately from Antelope Valley, but the water rights can be purchased anywhere along the state water project. So it could be water coming from Northern California. And the issue is, and something I think needs to be addressed, is that there are dozens of basins in critical overdraft and others which are not in sustainment, and they're all going to be bidding on that water that's coming down the state water project.
And one more piece of glue is that the state water project issued a new reliability report in, I think it was July. And this is based on the drying climate, one of that trend I showed you in the cumulative departure curve. And they say that they're gonna have 23% loss of their water supply by 2050 if they don't do some things. So that's just based on the hydrology projections. They're looking at those projections differently than they used to. There's something called stationarity, where you use the past as the trend for the future, but everything's changed over the last 20 or 30 years. So now they're using that last 20 or 30 years to project into the future. It's really, everything's turning upside down on that.
And I want to say something about that as well, the water project. People need to understand that, let's just say that you purchase the rights to 5,000 acre feet, but you only get 2 or 3 or 40% of that. You're still responsible for paying the variable cost on the full 5,000 acre feet, whether you get it or not. Variable costs are set, I believe, yearly by the state for state water project, and that basically determines how much you pay on a fixed basis. No, I'm sorry, not variable, fixed cost. Fixed cost that you have to pay, whether you get the water or not. So you pay fixed cost of 5,000 acre feet, even if you get 0, and it can be pretty expensive.
And Ron, I mean, personal anecdote, I worked for Vandenberg Air Force Base, they were connected to state water project. I was a public works director for about 8 years. Some years we got 100% of our allocation, some years we got 5% of our allocation. And so it is an incredibly difficult thing to do to manage a water system when you have this relatively unreliable predictability of where you get water from. And to David's point, I can show you pictures from Vandenberg. The water sources don't necessarily mix that well. They can cause problems. So, you know, I think one of the reasons I'm here is because I've lived this world of having these 2 water sources, and it can be managed, but it's expensive. It has to be done right, and it's extraordinarily difficult, and it may not be the best solution for this valley.
Incidental recharge, that was your question?
Yes.
So what I mean by that, so there's natural recharge comes through precipitation, and then mount front recharge is the main source of recharge in the basin. The stuff coming up, primarily the drainages along the Sierra Nevada. And then incidental is not natural, so that's things like irrigation return flows from urban and agriculture. You get water that goes beyond what they're trying to water. And you've got a leakage from water systems and sewers and septic systems. And then you've also got things like the LA aqueduct leakage and then their discharges. So those kind of things, so non-natural. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. I see what's coming up. If Judy will get a chance, you might have to tackle it.
Have you found the cost different? Okay, I realize that the groundwater authority is set on pipeline coming up South China Lake Boulevard to the Ridgecrest Heights Reservoir. What if you went over to Bowman Road? That's a room. pipeline, where if you put a plant over there along the district southwest well field, on one of those pieces of property and put the imported water in the apron, you wouldn't be reversing the flow then, would you?
Travis, I'll answer you, correct me if I'm wrong. First of all, we didn't design the route of the pipeline. We strictly took the route that was designed by, the groundwater authority.
I just said that.
Yeah.
I think what she's asking is if we rerouted the end of the pipeline, could we avoid the reverse flow issues and expenses? Yeah.
That is a good point, that it could be avoided that way. However, in the analysis that the GA's engineer did, they eliminated the option of coming up the 14 through the Red Rock State Park area. So they don't see it as being feasible to come in that side of the valley. That's why they come in along the 395 and come into the Ridgecrest Heights tank.
Yeah, I'm on West Cassett Sign, and kind of looked at it from 10,000 feet or however far. It seems to me, I understand your commitment to keeping the water affordable, keeping the price as low as you can. And I think that's probably your number 2 responsibility. I think your first responsibility is to be sure you have water for the citizens of Ridgecrest. And so that, I think, I haven't heard anyone talk about that. I haven't ever seen a report from the water district. I haven't read about it. I haven't seen it presented anywhere about exactly where you guys are at right now with your wells. We don't know how far they're dropping. We don't know how much you have left. We don't really know where you're at with your ability to provide water. But you presented, I have not seen a plan on how this is going to, I don't know what your status is, and I don't know what your plan does to fix it. So these are my concerns. I think you need to be sure you have your first priority first, and I think that is to have water for the valley, and it will be expensive. This is a desert community. I have a couple other observations as well.
Jason, do you want to answer that? Sure. This is, our operations manager.
So the district measures the groundwater levels monthly at our wells, and the readings that we get are consistent with the reports that are found in Tim's presentation. And we have seen, for example, at wells 30 and 31, because we haven't been able to use them because of the pipeline, where levels have come up. Okay.
So what I guess I heard you say you've done that study that shows you have enough water for the future in your wells. Or are you commenting more on the recent status of the wells?
I don't believe that's an issue at this time, is it, Jason? Okay, so the answer is yes, we have water.
So, like I stated at the beginning of my presentation, we all recognize that declining water levels can happen. The water district is committed to figuring this problem out, working on it. We believe, we don't see some imminent, I can't put a number on it, 100, 500 years, whatever, that we're gonna run out of water. But it would be a long time. We have some time to solve it. We're not interested in putting it off for a long time. The state set a deadline of 2040 for sustainability. The water district is committed to meeting that deadline. It's gonna take projects, it's gonna take money. We just wanna do it in the most cost-effective way.
Another observation. Because of groundwater storage, I think the critical thing in this station is how far the water drops. If it gets below the domestic wells, it gets below the areas that you folks pump, you've got a problem. There might be an awful lot of water left in the basin. But what really matters is where the wells are at and the quality of the water. So it's nice to know that there may or may not be more groundwater storage, but that's not the essential parameter. The essential parameter is how fast the wells are drawn down and how many wells are taken out by that. So just put that in perspective for the people in the audience here.
I don't know if there's a question of Tim, do you have anything to clarify on that?
Yeah, I certainly do, and I agree 100%. That, and that's the whole purpose of looking at this, is to look at the solution. You asked earlier, Wes, about where's the district's plan. It hasn't been developed. It will be developed through the adjudication, because the way that's gonna happen is a physical solution will be put together for the courts, and that's what the plan will be. And that plan will include, the model and looking at simulation and different scenarios and different project options to implement. And so that's where the plan is going to be put together over the next year or two and Jim can speak to the calendar more if he wants to, but it's in progress. It's a slow, arduous journey, and but it's going there.
So I kind of understand the plan doesn't exist just yet. The curves you showed, it looks like the water's not going to get down to the level. If you're assuming that the farm's going to go away, and yet they are your partner in this study. So I don't know if they're planning on going away, just an observation. See, I had another point I wanted to make. It's escaping for the moment, so I'll thank you for your time.
Come back up. And give it to you.
Ron Strand, City Manager, City Ridgecrest. Mr. Parker, I had a question about your point that you have on the technical model. In reading it, I never saw that there was a correlation between what you guys are looking at and how the water table was dropping. That was never mentioned before. Can you explain why that was missing, or was I just mistaken?
No, we looked at trends in the different wells, the hydrographs, but what you're talking about is what we will use the model for in the future. So this was an estimate of the safe yield going forward, and then we'll use the model to go through a verification and calibration process and look at those kind of things.
So right now we're looking at hopefully obtaining a $150 million working grant. My perception as city manager appears that when the 7650 safe yield was selected, that was a long process. The water district is involved. I think we totaled them for about 18 months. That number came up. In fact, there were some thoughts it might have been a little lower but being selected. It appears that when the replenishment fee came about, now there was an issue with the safe yield. Now we have a hypothesis that is at 13,400 acre feet a year. The assumption is that that's true, imported water is not needed. So we push that out. Let's say we delay, receiving water money, will never come back. What happens if you're wrong? What do we do? You're expecting me to sign off on our growth and our future based upon an incomplete hypothesis model. And that is my issue. What if you're wrong? I do have some issues with the dollar amount of the project. Well, the land acquisitions plan, there's a 25–30% contingency. Your consultant stacked another 25–30% contingency. Yes, we mentioned you could get it figured out, but to me, it was overinflated right from the very beginning. Right now, you are financing or saving for your water purchase through the replenishment fee. That's a different source of funding. So I think we just need to keep in mind that I got this valley 40 years ago. When Sarah's dad was arguing about this closed basin, open basin, your urban water studies say that you need imported water. In my view, that's layman. I see that as the most viable project that we can do. Right now, I don't see any other projects that you, the water district, has that is currently viable. Imported water does not get us there. I don't think this community wants toilet to tap as part of the solution. So I'd like to see what is your plan if your numbers are wrong, and we turn away the water funding. How are we going to get water to this valley? Probably gonna pay for it all ourselves. Thank you.
Well, first of all, we have no confidence in our numbers, number one. Number two is, what's not to say that the wrong assumptions have been made already, and has been a burden to this community with millions and hundreds of millions of dollars worth of cost and responsibility when it's not needed. All we're asking is that people look at these numbers, look at the analysis, not just throw them their wayside and say, oh, they're just a bunch of I don't want to say, they're good, not correct. Look at it, see if the scientists and hydrogeologists can agree on them, and come to a conclusion before we put a multi-million-dollar project in. In other words, I think I said it before, tap the brakes a bit. I know it's all about the money and where we're gonna get it, but other questions arise as well. Don't forget any money that you get, that there's a matching amount that is needed. Where is that gonna come from? Is that gonna be on property tax bills? Is it gonna be a higher replenishment fee, more cost on the public to come up with that 25% match? So those are the questions that we're trying to ascertain. We're just saying that we need to work through this process, cooperate, sit down with the scientists and the engineers, or whatever it takes, no lawyers, please, and let them come back with the best analysis, using the newest data that's available and the newest scientific methods that are available. That's what we're doing. That's what we ask. And if we're correct, we save multi-millions of dollars to this community, which I think we heard very badly. And if the scientists agree that it's less, then we need to look at more reasonable solutions. It's just that I feel very strongly that this pipeline is not the solution. I think you're opening up a can of worms that if it did get in, that's going to be an operational nightmare. It's going to be problems when the water's not there, and no one's taking into account. Has anybody even done, not just the operational economic analysis, but what is going to happen with day-to-day, I guess, flexibility in how the pipeline is used? When it's empty, when it has to be flushed, when it has to be cleaned. Those are extreme costs that we're very familiar with in the water district. And those are the things that we try to put together so we fully understand this. And until we do, I still think that the pipeline is probably one of the last possible solutions, because I don't think that we're in the trouble that we are. Thank you. Yes, I'm saying.
If you could grab that one. He's got to answer the previous speaker. I'll be in just a second.
I did want to mention too that, about a year ago, our Northern Griffin asked the groundwater authority if this $150 million grant would necessarily open the pipeline or be used for any project to help bring the balance to sustainability. And the answer was, yeah, we got a lot of money from WRDA for any project. At the last board meeting, we learned that they're changing the language in the congressional approval so that that money can't be used for any project, but it's exclusively for an imported water project. And it's a bit of a change. We're not against $150 million. We just want to apply to the right projects. Years ago, was faced with a problem of older wells that were slowly reaching maybe not so slowly, reaching the end of life. And the southwest area was identified as a candidate area for the new well field. Bradley Well was put in contact to do a study to verify that the Southwest actually had adequate water. And they concluded that there was about 2,400 acre feet per year recharge coming in from mostly from from El Paso Basin and the lower Sierra to the west of that basin. As it turns out, the water district has been mining in the southwest well field since day one. The water levels in the wells that were there were dropping a foot per year with the minor pumping that was already going on. And the reason I'm bringing this up is that you're approaching the same exact situation again, and you're talking about using the best available technical information. And in 2000 or so, Brown Caldwell was providing that exact thing for you, except maybe they listened too hard to what you wanted and were playing some games with their model. Because the model never agreed, not even in the beginning, with what was actually happening. So you've got to be very careful about what you're doing here. And I think the idea that somehow or other we can escape the high cost of the pipeline it just can't be. I think the idea that first order of business is portable water for your customers and preserving the water that we have left. One thing I will say here, there haven't been that many private wells that have tried out and have requested for financial support from the GA. But there are dozens of people that didn't want to do that are now hauling water. So if the water district really wants to do something valuable about trying to assess our current situation, do a survey and discover how many there really are that are hauling.
They run up here, but the microphone away from the deckers. I'm telling you.
I was just taking it away from the president. The town hall meeting. My comment is, because maybe some of the audience has forgotten or doesn't even know, that, Holly Pistachios was told by the court to pay the $30 million they owe the groundwater authority and not paying replenishment fees that would go greatly towards financing a water project. They were told this by the High Court of State.
My name is Lyle Fisher. I'm a domestic well owner on Strucker. I'm not a geologist, I'm not a hydrologist, I'm not even an engineer. And I only have one point of reference, my well. Okay, it was drilled in about 1978 by Aaron Kirschner. And he told me then, he said, I'm gonna give you 100 feet of water because the water table in this area goes down by 1.5 feet per year. 1978, he knew that. Okay. I thought it was gonna last the rest of my life, but it didn't make it. It's going down about 1 to 2 feet a year, every year, depth of water, 1 to 2 feet every year, all those years. Nothing, never comes up, always down. So all those naysayers that say we don't have a problem here, why does my well go down every year? Explain that one to me. So, yeah, there's a point two, forgot. Hey, you come back. Okay, thanks.
My name is Sam Merck. First of all, I would like to thank this meeting for the public. The public needs to know different viewpoints. They also need to know the numbers and not just guesses. When I first became at the GA, they purported the Indian Valley, the area was significantly off. The factors, I don't know. I'm not a geologist. I'm not a hydrologist. I'm not a BA or a doctor or anything. In fact,
I'm a water hauler. I get my water from the Indian Wells Valley Water District. I pay for it every month, just like everybody else. And because of that, I don't plant a lot of trees or anything else. I know how valuable water is. And again, I would like to thank the Indian Wells Valley Water District for holding a truly public meeting where everybody can get up and speak. I've attended GA meetings in the past, and we're always cut short. When I try to call in, sometimes I was put through, most of the time I was not. And at the GA meetings, they have it in the after, well, they're supposed to have it in the morning, but I've waited there for 2 hours for them to start the meeting. And I want to thank the Indian Wells Valley Water District for coming forth for a truly public meeting. Thank you.
Thank you, Sam. Next. Hello, everyone. My name is David Roy. Fairly new at this. I pulled up this chart. It pertains to, I was out in the desert and there's quite a bit of water getting dumped out of the LA output out last spring. And coincidentally enough, I found a chart, a report about that. And it lists the water levels for all the wells, and it has the wells mapped out. It is very informative, very well done. Just curiosity, I noticed one, when they talked about the water level difference between October 22 and May 23, they sorted the difference that from high to low, and one well went up 23 feet. And then another well went up 100 foot. So what does that mean? I mean, does that mean that the contour at the bottom of the basin, some areas collect, they're obviously narrower to where as water is added, it will reach a higher level. And that's just one of my questions. The other question is very basic. Like I'm off city water, and this was alarming me because my wife, her passion is having a small garden, and it's getting expensive. We killed off all our grass, got a few fruit trees. We try to manage it as we can, but I hate to see her lose her hobby, so that's why I'm here. If you're in well water, how do you track all the wells? How are they accountable? I got friends with wells, so I'm not attacking anyone, but how's this fairly, the payment system fairly distributed? Tim, I think you might be able to answer his first question about the characteristics of those particular wells going up, where their location.
It is the chart. So it has a water level difference. I hope I'm.
Yeah, I mean, it's simple math, so, so you have unconfined systems and you have confined systems. The confined systems are really, they're showing a pressure differential as compared to an unconfined system, which is sometimes called a water table aquifer. It's unconfined, and the response in a confined system can be much greater than an unconfined system. So you may have a response, and that's what I'm thinking is when you get a 23-foot rise, it's probably a pressure level change that you're seeing as compared to an actual water. It is actual water.
It's getting pushed up.
Yeah, but it's a pressure system change.
Okay, I was thinking that might be land I'd want to pursue in the future.
A confined system is a body of water that has a impermeable or semi-impermeable cap over the top. And when the water flows in from the sides, the pressure builds up under that cap, and that is what's responsible for things like artesian wells, where they sink a well and the water just comes all the way up to the surface. Up by Little Lake, they have a number of artesian wells for that very same reason. Again, the confining layer there is generally of the salt flow.
Yeah, experts, I think that.
I believe your other question about monitoring and pumping on wells, that's.
Private wells.
On private wells. I could say that.
Is that the honor system?
A number of wells are reported to the GA. I can't speak for all the independent private wells, whether they report it or not. I do know that a lot of estimates are done usually for those de minimis users that aren't mutuals. And so estimates are done based on what an average use of a family might be.
And not to hog air, just one more question, and this one's easy. So the groundwater authority fee on the bill, is that variable based on water usage or is it fixed?
Jason, do you want to explain that? Jason can explain, or I can explain it, because basically when you get into tier 2, that is basically all water, you pay I believe it's 24 cents per unit, which is an HCF, all water.
But you're paying one item on the bill, you're already paying for water usage, and then the groundwater authority, it's always still based on.
That groundwater amount is 24 cents for the pumping fee, which you pay on all your water. And then once you get into tier 2, which I forget where that HCF is, but then there's another roughly $5.25 that is paid per unit.
And that groundwater fee is going towards the pipeline?
It goes straight, it just gets paid to the GA.
Or
it says a pass through for water district collective, and then it goes right to the ground.
What's that getting applied to? Or, I'm not attacking, I'm just curious.
The pumping fee is supposedly to take care of their administration costs, and the replenishment fee is to purchase water.
Okay, because I was gonna say the pipeline is a fixed cost item, like a road. It's gonna cost a certain amount, so I would expect everyone to pay an equal portion for that portion of the project.
Yeah,
So I'm hoping that's happening.
Yeah, that's not happening with replenishment.
Okay.
Nothing's being charged for that yet. It's just a replenishment fee that is being collected to purchase water.
I got you. Yeah.
Yeah, so private monitoring pumping for private wells, most private wells, the ones I'm aware of, including mine, do not have meters on them, and I'm pretty secure in saying that most of the private owners don't put meters on the wells. Right, it's not required by law, the state of California, in fact, I think SIGMA says you can't force them. The groundwater authorities cannot force them to put measuring implements on their wells. So if the private well owner, part of the estimation process is that they're considered a de minimis user, which is less than 2 acre-feet a year per well, then that's.
Yeah, but it's the honor system?
Well, you can, some short answers, yes.
It's
Long
yes
answer is, you could look and see what kind of landscaping they've gotten.
So city dwellers, people on city water are assuming the whole burden of this.
So,
which seems that, out of my whole, everything I've talked about, that seems not really fair.
Understood.
But I have friends that are well owners, and I would, more power to them, they're my personal ones.
Right, so initially we asked, it wasn't possible that they could make the replenishment fee, spread it out as a tax across all parcels, and we were, correct me if I'm wrong, Jim, we were informed by the Kern County, legal department that couldn't be done at that time, that we had that replenishment.
Yeah, so there's some fundamental flaws here between the data and math, but I don't think, I wouldn't move too far ahead too quickly. Another thing is, I'm gonna go get water for my buddy now.
Oh.
Yeah.
I'm gonna buy a big truck.
Yeah, but Cass, I wanted to just make one last statement, and I'll stop showing up here. But first of all, I wanted to remind everybody that all the alternatives to the pipeline have been studied by the groundwater authority. So I want to be sure the public understands that. It's not like we're going to find alternatives that haven't already been considered. And the second point I want to make, and it kind of reinforces what Ron Strand said, is that
there are a lot of moving parts right now. People have been working, flying the halls of Washington DC, getting grants from the state, other grants. We're well on our way to designing the pipeline, and we're well on the way to finding some funding back east. If you guys are successful in killing that, which is where people seem to be taking what you're doing, are you prepared to step up someday and redo all that work and refund all that money if it turns out to be needed? You really want to kill it right now. On a study that was paid for by people who, in some cases, I think, paid for the results that they got. So that's my question. Are you guys prepared to step up in the future and redo all the work that's been done to get this progress on this pipeline in place right now? Because that's where it could be. Thanks. Thanks for that. I'll just repeat what I said. We're not in favor of canceling the work project of $150 million. We simply ask that there be the flexibility to utilize those funds with whatever the science tells us is the most appropriate way to solve the problem. So, this sort of narrative that's out there that we're trying to kill the $150 million, or we don't want that. We know it's going to take money. We want federal money as much as anybody else too. So, we are concerned that the groundwater authority is currently changing the language to say, oh, we can only use that money for the pipeline, when in the past it was said that it can be used for any project to help us achieve sustainability, such as recycled water and other things that can be done with water. And we inject it back into the aquifer, and those are the projects that are viable. And there are, I think Ron told me this. He basically said it might not be one giant project that solves this problem. It could be a number of smaller projects that cumulatively add up to the right solution to our problem. And there are other means to get there. But we have to, let the court case that's going on sort of play itself out. Hopefully, the science that we've put forth gets studied by experts in the courts and Department of Water Resources, and we come up with an agreeable safe yield, and we implement solutions from there using the funds from the federal government. Definitely. So I want to go back to the public state water project in the water. So we use a 40% number, so historical average is closer to 60. So I just want to clarify that, and so I think it's important that we keep the numbers as straight as we can. So the other thing I want to talk about is the 14,000 safe yield. So in the event that we had 14,000 safe yield, does that allow for any growth in the city? And even if it was, it appears to be done in one, if you stay for 19,000 was the amount we can use, and so that puts us still at 5,000 acre foot front overdraft. So I think it's important for the public to know that for the base, any expansion of the base or expansion of the city, we need more water. And I think everybody's pretty consistent with that. And so I'm concerned that even by not having a plan and coming forward with some means of remedying this problem that we have that's been put upon us by the state, wasn't put out by the city or Kern County. This was formulated by the state for SIGNA and the Department of Water Resources. So my concern is that 14,000 acre feet, we still have a problem. And with that, it doesn't allow for growth. The other thing I have a question with is the adjudication and the risk that's associated with that. So the water district has chosen to pursue this lawsuit, the adjudication process, and in the event, like Tim Parker was stated earlier, that the plan would be dynamic and depending upon the outcomes of the court process. And so there's a risk factor that I think the public should, be aware of too, that you're not guaranteed the amounts of water that you use in formulating the plan. That water could be less. The judge and the courts may rule that certain entities get X amount of water. That would be a legal
proper way of determining water rights, which I'm in complete agreement with. But in the event that the water district was to get less water, that's going to put the citizens of Ridgecrest at a greater risk. Now, one, you're gonna have less water, you're gonna have to find more water, and two, as was alluded to by Clear Capital earlier, that 33%, were roughly, I had a rough estimated it, but in my head, that those costs were due to inflationary costs. I can tell you that water has gone up in the years since the water district and the board and, everyone has been looking at purchasing, permanent groundwater, solution. So that's a high risk that's being taken by the water district to sue the city, maybe, all the well owners and all the water users in this valley. With the fact that you may not get the outcome that you choose. If you don't, then that's going to come back and cost all of us a great amount of water. And then you're going to be behind the curve. You want to procrastinate on this interconnection project, but there's no doubt the cost is going to go up in other people in this country, for looking at water. It's not just the state of California, it's the western region, and even other parts of the country, because of contaminants with, a variety of plastics and alcohols and that type of thing. That's the whole thing. I'm more concerned with our area right here. My kids, the future of the 19 immediate family members that I have, that choose to live here, work here, and want to be a part of this community in the future. And I think we owe it to them to have a plan and do what's best in the most cost-effective manner. If you speak about cost effectiveness, but yet procrastination is going to cost us in the long run. And the last thing, I guess that's pretty much it, because I kind of touched base on the cost of waiting as stated by Clear Capital, because I think they're right. I mean, there's no doubt, I wish you guys had more proactive, data and projects to alleviate this problem.
I want to address the growth issue. First of all, if we use the numbers that you suggested, let's say it is 14,000 acre feet, and our total pumping now is 11,000. And I keep hearing about growth in the city, which I agree to, but if you look at the trend over 30, 40, 50 years, there isn't the growth that you're expecting. And I always use this analogy. Let's just say the base doubles in size, which I think is hardly possible. Doubles in size. Their estimates for water are based on 6,000, one was 6,000. So let's say it goes to 12,000. And so that extra 6,000, when you bring in this ancillary family and services and such, might grow to 10,000. So you're talking about the city, if the base doubles in size, maybe getting to, I don't know where we are now, 25,000, 28 to 38,000. So I'm not sure what kind of growth you're talking about that's going to put such a strain on our water system as you're talking about. I don't see it, especially not in the near future, even if the base was to double. And going to the estimates for with the averages from the water project, I believe you have something to say about that, Travis. I think we have 40, you have 60. Can you maybe clear that up?
I'll make a quick comment. Once again, in our cost estimate, we used the GA's estimate of 60%. So once again, we were more conservative on their side. It could be worse. So there's all these concerns, that maybe we didn't, maybe we're overestimating or underestimating what water when it comes to the state water project. We used the GA's number about 65%. So if we needed 1,500 acre feet, we theoretically blocked 2,500. It could be worse than that. That would mean the cost would be higher. The other thing I want to talk about is risk. California, from the biggest picture, California gets water from the Colorado River, the state water project, the water we capture off the runoff and dams, and from the groundwater. The Colorado River is undertaking a plan to cut some 4 million acre feet of usage out of that river over the next 10 years or so between 4 or 5 states. The state water project, which supplies water mostly to farmers and cities in the San Joaquin Valley, Sigma is going to cause, I believe, a reduction of several 100,000 acres of farming due to not enough water. I read an article yesterday where, that water source of Central Valley, which is a combination of wells and water coming from the state water project. The state water project has been not supplying enough water, so they're having tremendous problems over there.
So when you look at where we're gonna get our water, that's where we wanna go get our water, because ultimately that's where it comes from. It comes from the state water project, it's pumped up into, the Rose Pond area, it's pushed down to the ground aquifer, they pump it out, they're gonna, pump it over to California City, and pump it over to here. There are risks associated with any solution you choose. One of the risks is that those other water supplies across the state, whether that's the Colorado River, whether that's the state water project, whether that's runoff from the mountains, either, because we've been getting less runoff, that's an issue as well. There's risks associated with any of those choices, but, it's a tough one. When you look at the map of California, all the red, all the wells that are really having problems, they're not over here, they're over there in the Central Valley. And that's where we're reaching out to buy this water to put it in. And there's a real risk that could be a rough investment. If it does drop to 20%, if I want 1,000 acre feet, now we're gonna buy 4,000 acre feet, and then it could get worse. So, we don't know what the climate is gonna be in the future. So it's also a big picture view from the water district perspective of like, where do we wanna go source water if we're gonna do that? And that's, let's not underestimate those risks as well.
Let me further clarify the reliability percentage. So long-term, that is true. It's around 55–60% reliability. However, that factors in decades and decades of operation. If you look at the last 20 years, which as Tim had touched on, has been a drier period in time, the reliability has been right around 42–45% on average over those 20 years. Our office and me personally prepare a replenishment report for a low desert client every single year. And earlier this year, we were notified that the future reliability should be anticipated to be lower than the last 40 years, 30 years or so. So they're realizing that it's becoming an issue, DWR. And the client that we work with on that is seeing their water deliveries drastically be cut. Most of the last 10 years, we've had some issues. So it is a concern that is becoming kind of more to the forefront, I guess you could say, as this drought over the last 20 years has really been kicking into place.
Let me just add on top of that, my additional, I mentioned this earlier, was the state Department of Water Resources came out with a new reliability report, which indicated they're predicting about a 23% loss of their water supply between now and 2050. That means reliability is going down. Now that's current projections, and that's without any new projects the state's doing. So hopefully they get some projects going quick.
My name is Chloe Staub, I'm a citizen here in town. Can't speak to the technical side of any of this. Listen to all your meetings, listen to all the GSA meetings. Honestly, come out of it thinking, I don't know what's on issues. Well, let me rephrase that. I don't think anyone's trying to lie. I really don't. I think you guys have our best interests in mind. I think the GSA does as well. But what comes to my mind as somebody who pays my water bill every month is at what point we're going to hit the tipping point where we're spending more money trying to save money than if we just put the money into the project to fix the problem. I see, you're spending all this money on these great scientific consultants. I don't question any of their data, any of what they're presenting. But I hear that this research has been done for decades. And we seem to, at least from what I've gathered, just keep coming to the same basic answer. We're going to need more water. And I appreciate that you're trying to save my money, but at this point, knowing that your costs are getting more expensive and my water rates are already going to get higher to pay that, I don't want to keep paying for you to do the same studies over and over and lawyer fees. So convince me of why that's a good idea. Convince me what's different in this data that isn't just recrunching the numbers in a different way to look part of it.
Tim, could you please answer that one? I think you can, because, we're not duplicating studies.
No, we're not doing the same studies over and over again. We're applying some of the older science in a little more comprehensive way. And we're building better models. And we're going to end up coming to decisions, through the process that the district has, put forward, which is a comprehensive adjudication where both sides will be heard. And the science, will be heard throughout and decisions will be made.
Let me just comment a little bit on the cost. So, totally understand the position you're coming from. The cost of research, the cost of legal fees. So I'll try to put this in perspective. Let's say we're spending $1.5 million a year on trying to find the right solution through science and legal fees. Compare that to $350 million to build a pipeline, and thereabouts $285 million. $10 million a year with a 50-year lifetime of that pipeline is another $500 million. So you're talking about $800 million. And the question is, how much money do you want to invest in studies and getting to the right answer before you commit to paying $800+ million over the next 50 years for you and your children and everybody that lives here? And that's a tough question, because that's a lot of money. So we feel like the amount of money we're spending is justified to get to the right answer. So hopefully you understand our perspective, because that, the bulk of that $850 million is going to be billed to the residents here through the water district and all that good. And so that's what we're looking at.
And it's something that needs to be brought forward is it's not, the pipeline isn't one and you're done. The design life of the pipeline is going to be about 50 years. So that means it's going to have to be replaced in 50 years. And all of the plants and all of the equipment necessary to maintain the pipeline and to treat the water has to be replaced after 50 years. So it isn't just $800 million and you're done. It's a huge increase to cost of living here in the valley that goes on as long as the pipeline exists. So the economic study it appears that the detailed economic study of the impact of the pipeline solution came after the plan that the Groundwater Sustainment Agency put forward. I would like to have seen a detailed economic study done by the GA before the plan was put into place. Because if we can't keep the water costs within a reasonable limit, we're going to have a problem with our pretty much single employer in the valley. They already have trouble getting people to come here in the middle of the desert. They're having trouble, and although Congressman Fong has gone and helped address some of the problems they were going to have at the hospital with neonatal units and that sort of thing. But imagine, with the cost escalation for the Navy in order to pay their engineers and scientists enough money to stay here and pay the cost of living in the desert. We have to take that into account as well. It's not just one year done, it's an increase, and it goes as long as the pipeline is existing.
Hi, Shirley Kirkpatrick again. Just a few observations. You mentioned 23% less water. It was stated by the State Water Project, and you mentioned Bureau of Reclamation, I guess it was. Well, my concerns is, number one, most of us who lived here many years know that our Owens Lake once flowed through Turner Lake, and we had plenty of water. And then LA Department of Water and Power ran the water. Well, that's before we became populated here in Ridgecrest. But any event, so what's that LA have to do with us? Well, there's still issues with who decides who gets what on water. And like I said, you say follow the science, and I totally agree. Don't follow, well, maybe you should follow the money. We did get a grant for $7.6 million by was that Carla Nemeth? She's part of the, I guess you call that, makes these water decisions. Just as recently as October 3rd this year, Bureau of Reclamation are in a lot of trouble with the environmental failures because of the Klamath Dam removal. So there's a lot of cost of money going with that. So if you guys follow up on that. So if we're following these state funded people are giving us ideas on what to do with our own water, we'll see what's going on with the Klamath dam removal project that's happening right now. So recently we had a lot of water release that came from Freeman Gulch. And I just don't understand. I don't believe we're in a drought any longer. It's just mismanagement of our water. So we're worried about our local area here, but we're not taking into consideration that it is state of California is probably making these decisions, and they don't have our best interest. They have to come up with groundwater decision, as you say, by 2050. But like I said before, the mismanagement of the dam removal project, $7.6 million to do a pipeline. I was at the scope meeting, and there was a lot of good questions asked. And what kind of environmental problems would be with that? And I don't think that was addressed. And I never asked, why can't that pipeline come from the the aqueduct? But I guess it's too rocky and all that stuff. But you look at these decisions and how it's destroying the desert and how this is all coming about. So this is just observations. I've lived here for many years, and I've seen what's happened since the 70s. And I've seen what happened since 2015 when Groundwater Authority became a law, and then the bureaucracy came together, and here we are. So anyway, I just wanted to share that. Thank you.
So good evening, gentlemen. My name is Mike Neal. I want to echo Ms. Merck's statement earlier. I appreciate you making this available, taking the time to make it live streamed and recorded for the public to both listen to, all, in the distance or later on, and go through it as they wish, in spite of city council or whoever it was, city manager saying, oh, no, you can't get it here where it's easy to do that. You make it happen anyway. So thank you. And we're having a town hall where people get to talk, and they don't get to sit and watch, worry about giving up, oh, I gotta be done in 3 minutes, so I'm gonna be done in 5 minutes. So I'm not planning on taking more time, don't let that scare you. But what I see here is kind of a summary is we got practical problems that have to be addressed in this particular situation with the water supply in the valley. And we have philosophical problems in back of that as to how we want our lifestyle to be, how we want it to end up being on, I'm not gonna be alive in 40 years. Everybody's talking about 40 years down the line, whatever. They have families here, they're concerned about that. One of the questions is, okay, if you want to put in a multi-$100 million pipeline so you can have supposedly all the water you want, even though the water supply has been spoken, if you want to look at the data, you can figure it out yourself. It's highly questionable that you'll even get anywhere near as much water as has been projected by the GA. Do you want to pay an additional $200 a month to get that water to your faucet and to your bathtub and to your lawn? What is the people pushing this pipeline project think that's going to do to the economy in this valley? Furthermore, what do they think is going to happen to the economy in the valley if they manage to force Searles Valley to pay the replenishment fee and then have to go out of business and lose 400 plus jobs in this valley? What do they think the quality of life is going to be like at that point? That's never been publicly discussed, but it's a very real possibility. At the moment, Searles Valley's got back on it, so we're not paying it. Take it to the court and see what happens. So, as to why we need or do not need to do this, I thoroughly appreciate new studies being done. I can thoroughly appreciate the confluence of 6 different approaches being taken, and the results correlated together to look at and say, are these converging at all, or are they all over the map? And the fact that, this is science-driven, basically, kind of situation. And I've worked in the science field for years, and I will tell you personally, I worked in one particular kind of antenna for the Navy. I worked on that on and off for over 30 years. At the end of the 30 years, I've used techniques that I've learned piecemeally, little by little, about how those beasts operated, what restricted them, what things you could get away with that people didn't think you could before, and
for our retirement is to put together a design and make it patented and available to another agency that was the lowest volume, highest frequency bandwidth, for that type of antenna that had been made to that point. And it took 30 years, if I don't, 10 years before that, 20 years to mess with that, and then said, oh, it's all done, and this is all there is, can't do this, can't do that. We taught that, this is all we can do. I would have never gotten that. Well, when I see 6 studies done, and one in particular, a rabble, with a completely different approach that's ever been used, and looking at all that data, and then I think back about the supposed study which several of you stated the GA will not make the model available. Is that correct? Is that a correct statement? Did you say that basically? Whoever it was, I forgot.
GA won't make the model available. Is that a true statement?
That's a true statement.
True statement.
Okay, any publication will not make something like that available is completely suspect as to its methodology and its intentions. Now, I cease to believe anything they say when they do those kind of things. And as evidence with a lot of other characteristics of the operation of the GA, I've so mistrust him that I refused to go to the meetings for the last 2 years. I gave it up because I can't trust anything they say or anything they do, and they've evidence that they don't want the public involved. So who am I going to trust? Well, go to a water district meeting and see how it goes there as opposed to the GA meeting. And you can see the difference for yourself. And you see it right here tonight. They want to hear people, they're doing this, they sit here for 2.5 hours, and here we are. So I said it would go on, I guess I'm gonna go a little more. But we don't need to just take the word GA and go on with this, multi-$100 million project without stepping back and taking new looks that have been made. The studies are here. They're right there. If you want to look at it in detail, I guarantee you can put in a public records request to the water district and they'll give it to you. Because they're a public agency and they understand that the GA, by the way, is not elected, and they know they're not elected. They don't have to do anything the public agency is supposed to do necessarily. They do what they want to do. They do it all the time. So we need to consider, we want to basically hamstring the citizens of this valley with the cost of a pipeline that may very well not be needed, or do we want to not go that route? And we may have to say, well, we might have to limit the growth in this valley. But it's been self-limiting for a very long time. Anybody who's been here for over 40 years like I have knows that. It all gets on the base. And if you think the base is going to ramp way up and bring in 2,000 people like the big cool-off some years ago, it ain't going to happen. Okay? It's going to be pretty much like it is right now. So, a fixed water supply for this valley will work just fine.
Thank you. Very good.
And Smithson again, I just had a quick question. One gentleman mentioned, toilet to tap, so water treatment for some kind of water usage, not necessarily household. And I just wonder what other options are you thinking about besides the pipeline or even possible?
Yeah.
I'll do that if you guys think that. First, let me say that the board has been eminently clear that we're not going to do toilet to tap. And that's a legal process where you take wastewater and you put it back and you blend it with the water that you have to treat it. That's not going to happen. There's another process where you can take wastewater and the city can build a new wastewater treatment plant and you take that water. And we just did a tour of a place that's doing this in San Diego about 2 weeks ago on a much larger scale, about 10 times the amount that we're at here. What they're doing is they're taking that wastewater and they're treating it and putting it back into a lake and letting it and they're reusing it. We believe that somewhere you could take the wastewater and you could take it and treat it to a very high standard. Trust me, these standards, they're good enough. You could drink it, and when you go to these places that do that, they have you drink it at the end, but we're not gonna do that here. You can take it and treat it, you can put put it on the ground, you let it percolate in, you find an appropriate place, and each filter goes back into the aquifer, or you can inject it in the aquifer if you do additional treatment. So those are technologies where you replenish the aquifer with water reuse, or it's basically recycling using sort of generally natural processes after significant treatment options. So that's an option. And I think it's also worth talking about, you know, people talk about LADWP, and to put the pipeline in perspective, this is one way you can look at it. At the beginning of the pipeline, they envisioned bringing something like 1,500 acre feet per pipeline, and at the end, somewhere around 6,000. So let's say for 50 years, you brought 5,000 acre feet of water through the valley through this pipeline. That would be a grand total over 50 years, or 250,000 acre feet. Just so everybody knows, that's how much water LADWP runs by this valley from their two aqueducts every year. Every year. Now, is LADWP going to give us their water? No, not likely. No, something. But this is the guy who came with the dock on the outside of the obvious solution. If 250,000 acre feet run right over there on the side of the hill. That's a tough nut to crack. It's a very difficult political option. But it's, to put it in the scale of things, is really mind-boggling. Like 1 year with the water. You know, another example of LADWP, they did. They dumped in a wet year, 12,000 acre feet of water.
12,600.
12,600 acre feet. Yeah, that was just in this valley. If you look at dumped up north or down south. You know, so there's, you know, when you talk about other options, somehow the ability to capture some of that water. Somehow to do a combination of capturing some of that water, capturing some water that potentially is in other areas that can be brought into the valley. And then I want to talk a little bit about regulatory approaches. You know, so
George, I hate to cut you off, but we've had people waiting for 2.5 hours online to ask questions.
Well, then,
And I just got a note that I'll need to deal with them.
okay, but it's,
Let's extend this one.
I'll save my lecture on regulatory stuff for later. All right, so much.
Okay, online, what do we have? Do we have them online now? Renee, are you there? Take yourself off mute if you're listening.
Jason, did you want to address Renee first? I think you had unmuted me instead.
Who's ever first in line? Who is this?
This is April Kegwin.
Go ahead.
I will be submitting comments as a district ratepayer. And so my first question for Mr. Kaczynski, I believe at IWGA meetings years ago, it was pointed out that you have a well on your property. Is that correct?
No, it is. No, it is not. It is not correct.
Okay. Well, Mr. Kaczynski, to address you again, you voted and motioned for the GSP, which included the data you're now saying is incorrect. Given your year's worth of support in approving numerous reports, fees, and other analyses of the groundwater levels combined, with you seconding the motion that directly approved the submission of the now DWR-approved groundwater sustainability plan, I think it is safe to acknowledge that members of the public would doubt your understanding of the severe issues at hand. I know as a district ratepayer myself, your history of wavering points of view are very concerning. I urge members of the public to review settlements of other adjudications. The district has opened the door to lose a good portion of the sustainable yield currently received, which would result in millions and millions of dollars spent on litigation that could last 10 to 20 years before being resolved. And as Councilman Heyman pointed out, the district could very likely come out on the losing end, and that will result in millions and millions of more dollars needed to purchase additional imported water not currently budgeted. To the members of this board, I have heard numerous times that the IWGA has not been involved in this process, but that could not be further from the truth. The IWGA board and staff had been requesting these documents for months before this, and we were met with the same response. It's part of litigation. If you as a board cared about this public and its water future as much as you have stated, why would reports about something as important as the water levels in this basin not be submitted to the IWGA to allow for thorough review and discussions in such a critical year as we are submitting groundwater sustainability plan amendments in January of 2025? The federal government, City of Ridgecrest, and counties of Kern, Inyo, and San Bernardino are in support of this project and waiting for you to, as you have said during this meeting, come sit at the table. not when it benefits you, but when it is a benefit to the ratepayers who have voted for you to sit in those seats. When it comes to this project to import water that will sustain this community for generations to come, we are not creating the wheel. We are simply catching up to what everyone else has been doing for decades. Thank you.
All right, thank you for your opinion. I'm going to address the one thing I keep hearing all the time, that the water district voted for the plan. Yes, the water district voted for the plan. The plan had at least 5 different options in it to look at. And in my opinion, they have not all been thoroughly looked at. It was also understood when the vote was taken, it was a living, breathing document, including reevaluating the water in storage as well as. So yes, the plan was voted, but we understand that this is to continue to reevaluate, to look at data, and to go ahead and thoroughly look at all the other options. I don't believe they've all been looked at. I believe that once the plan was approved, it was the pipeline, and that was the only one that was fairly looked at. Everything else was looked at from the aspect of how can we make it fail. So that's my opinion. So that's why, yes, vote for the plan. It was understood this is a living, breathing plan. And we're going to reevaluate the data, reevaluate water storage, reevaluate safety, and look at all these other options and move down the line. And that's why it was voted on. So yes, we voted on it, but under those conditions. Hold on,
Well, just to address that, Mr. Kaczynski, you want to say how you voted for specific parts of the GSP and you weren't fully in support of other things. That is the exact reason why Director Vallejo didn't support the GSP. So that excuse does not matter to this public. Because if you thoroughly believed in inaccuracy in this GSP, as you now claim, you would have never voted for it, let alone seconded the motion.
I'm not here to debate. You have your opinions. I have mine. I voted for it with the understanding it was a living, breathing document, not a closed book. Not that I doubted the data that was in there at the particular time, but that the data would be looked at and continue to evolve. So let's get that straight. With that being said, Juan is coming.
So we have provided all of our studies to the Groundwater Authority prior to publication for the use of the public. So to say that we are not sharing our information with GA is incorrect. And I hear people say repeatedly that the groundwater sustainability plan has been approved by the state. If you review what the state wrote about the groundwater sustainability plan, what they said was the plan met all of their basic requirements, and they had a number of caveats at the back, including their uncertainty about the plan's dependency on a pipeline to meet sustainability. So the plan has been jumped through the first hurdle with the Department of Water Resources. It is not written in stone. It hasn't been fully accepted and stamped. And if you were to look at the caveats, there's a number of issues that are yet to be addressed.
All right. Who else we have on?
She's not responding.
Who's that? Renee has it. I'll give you one more chance, Renee, if you're out there.
I messaged her, she didn't respond to that.
Okay. All right. Anybody else? No one online?
I'm an observer of things. We have lived here for 55 years, and driving around the greater desert area, I have observed that areas such as the Victor Valley area, Anthem Valley, Hesperia, the Antelope Valley are both areas that underwent adjudication where certain government entities had to import water. Tehachapi as well. My observation is that after importing that water, those areas have grown tremendously. That's just an observation. Personally, I don't want Ridgecrest to grow or like it small. I'd even like it smaller, more like it was. My other thing is, and I don't think you should even try to answer this, your, safe yield report and your water and storage report, if they're adopted, what happens if they're wrong in the future? What happens if there isn't the water that you think there is? What will happen with subsidence? I think you need to be carefully yourselves examine those issues and see if you can find the answers. And calm down quite a bit. Again, Travis, I know you have a long ride home. I asked this question actually of the GA, and I'll ask it of you again. What's wrong with the pipeline, this nasty pipeline that the board doesn't want? What's wrong with it? It's already coming out Highway 395 to South China Lake Boulevard. What's wrong with it? Keep on going another however many miles it is, 3 miles, 4 miles, to Bowman Road, which is where the district, yes, it's southwest Southfield is clear to the west, but its pipeline runs right down Bowman Road to the A-zone tanks, which are just west of Ridgecrest. It seems to me, I'm not an engineer, but it seems to me that that actually would be a more practical thing to do.
Charge pipeline.
So I do apologize. When you asked the question earlier, I was thinking coming from 14 towards Southwest Wellfield, not from 395 down Brown Road to it. So I do apologize. That bringing the pipeline to that location, it is a longer pipeline. It's a couple miles longer, and you would still need a tank to be added there with the treatment that was referenced earlier. But that would be a potential viable option.
The one going in the right direction, right?
Correct, yeah. And I'm not entirely sure why the plan currently produced by the GA doesn't go that way. I'm sure it was looked at for, it's looking at the connection points closest to that end of the valley. I'm sure it's something that they have looked at and considered, but I'm not entirely sure why they went the route they did. The one advantage to connecting where they're at, there's an existing tank there for the district. Southwest Wellfield doesn't have one.
Basically, the simple answer is, we're not charging pipeline design. Groundwater authority said they can design it, and this is the way it's gonna be. You know, we're sort of dealing with what they told us they're gonna do. It's project pipeline compass. What is the area of water you like to have? I understand this, you guys would prefer to have it direct inject. Yes. Would that, Travis, would that change your cost of the pipeline if it was direct inject and it wasn't in the system?
So direct injection is something that has been discussed. It would require additional infrastructure for the injection wells themselves. But it would not involve the direct connection into the district's system. So the upgrades to the district system would likely not be needed from reversing.
Would that save the cost? In your opinion?
When you say save, you mean?
Yeah, you came up with a cost. For what it would cost the district to upgrade your system to accept that water. If you not have to accept the water, what's in your opinion, the difference in cost between direct inject and upgrading the system in the district? Which one's cheaper?
What's the trade-off?
Again, in fairness, they may have happened to
calculate those numbers as our consultants.
Yeah, we haven't really dove too much into that, but that is a viable question.
I'm just asking. Certainly some of the worst study.
Then the other one is that you keep talking about the current model that the GA is using. But what we failed to talk about is who paid for that model, who developed that. The Navy paid for that model and it was developed by an independent institution. So this isn't the boogeyman that is kind of being inferred to. If boogeyman is not the right term, I apologize. But it was paid for by the Navy. Yes, they have given access to it for the GA to run models. We don't actually own the model, but the Navy developed that model. So when you start referring to the inequity or inaccuracies of the same, you're talking about the Navy's model and they brought it from table. Thank you.
Hey, Tom, I don't want to late, this question's not benign and pretty simple. I just want to read through the report with Mr. Parker, or you guys can answer it too, but so, these polygons.
Yeah.
And I think that you applied some additional polygons to your analysis, and you started to touch on it at the beginning. I think it was geological reason that you did that. I was really interested when I was reading the report on why that was.
Yeah, simple. Yeah, it's to cover the groundwater flow model that's being developed. So it covers that. It coincides with the model.
Okay, it's just graphically, it's just different. I wouldn't say graphically, but there's quite a bit more polygons.
Finer resolution. It's a little larger area. It covers a larger portion of the basin. It's the difference.
Oh, okay, so, and you brought the mistake, sir. So does it coincide with the electromagnetic data that you guys acquired? Is that right?
No, I said, so Ramble has constructed and is in the process of calibrating the groundwater flow model for the basin. That has an area to it that largely covers the basin and it has some polygons, coincides with that same area.
I think, Tim, what I see is there's two models. There's a static model, which was created based on the Ramble information, electromagnetic and such, and then what you're talking about now is the flow model.
Right.
Okay.
Right, I'm talking about the groundwater flow model that Ramble is calibrated.
Hey, thank you. I appreciate you guys having that on the website. Appreciate it.
I know it's getting late. See if there's any more questions out there before I just turn it over to the board for comments. Yep. Please do. Oh, you've been holding out.
He's remembered his point from earlier.
No, I keep trying to remember.
Okay. That's not just you.
My time to get here. My name is Tom DiDomenico. I'm a resident of Bridgecrest. This is a concern or just a statement? We're going to buy a pipeline for X hundred millions of dollars to get water in the valley. We're going to pay upfront each year to buy water rights, but not knowing whether or not we're going to get the water. But we're still paying the water rights. So some days it runs dust, some days it runs water. Who's looked at the possibilities of what might really happen through that process?
Any sort of thought about it, if I could comment on that?
Yeah, go ahead, George. I'm saying that, yeah, we're taking that. That's some of the concerns.
So there's a number of people come in and said, like, what if the water district is wrong? What if it's not 10 or 14,000? So SIGMA accounts for that in the following way. You get to 2040, you reduce pumping. I should say, I'm not a comment. We've done a fantastic job of conservation about it. We reduced water. Our water is low. Even with the agriculture that exists today, the water pumping estimated by the GA itself, 2023 was under 20,000 acre feet, of which I think 8,000 plus was ag. So just presume that ag went away, you're down to like 10 or 11,000 acre feet of water if ag were to go away. That's a, 7,650 plus a pipeline, 14,000 on our side, so how do you really know
reach sustainability. You know, the way they deal with it is they reduce your pumping to a certain level, and that's gonna happen over time. By 2040, we're gonna get to what we believe to be the sustainable number. Then you're gonna monitor, and if the wells are still declining, you'll have to do more. But imagine if we could get down to 10 or 12,000 acre feet from where we were previously, which was upwards, we're pushing 30,000 acre feet. 35,000 acre feet. Now think about how far we've come already. You know, and so on the other side of that coin is, what if you build a pipeline that's so expensive that it is harmful to the economy? And that's why there's a lot of people looking at this and going, wow, what happens if the economy goes down? What if the population goes down? In theory, the other extreme there is you could build a pipeline that costs hundreds of millions of dollars. You could have bad effects on the economy, and the water usage could go down to the point where you're not really even needing to use that pipeline, you still have to pay for it. And that's the other sort of wildly extreme thing that can happen. And that's, you know, I'm not saying it will, but if you take ag out, we get down to 10,000-ish acre feet, you know, we're pretty close. And so why not kind of work your way down there? This is that sort of environmental law I talked about. It's like, you don't just drop to the bottom. You work your way towards a goal systematically. That's how you prevent unnecessary economic harm, and why a lot of people support us in the approach that we want to take, which is to work our way down to the sustainability, not just drop to this level and cause all these, you know, tremendous expenses to be incurred in the past.
Yeah, one other thing I wanted to discuss or mention is that once we do this, we're now beholden to the California Water Project for our water needs in the future. And it sounds to me like it's not very reliable. So you can have a lot of water or no water, or somewhere in between, but we won't be in control of that. So anyway, that's all. Thank you. Travis, did you have something?
I wanted to address the second part of his question. The whole idea of the sometimes dust, sometimes water. With regards to the state water project, that percent reliability does fluctuate substantially from year to year. You have some years that'll be 80, 90, 100%. You have other years that it can get as low as 0. And they do their best to try to allocate water, but it is something that has quite a bit of variability, largely dependent on the rainstorms that hit Northern California and the snowpack in the Sierras. It varies quite a bit. So to answer your question, there is quite a bit of variability. That would be something that would potentially be an operational challenge with the pipeline, on how you get those really wet years to the valley, what you do in the dry years. That is how it would ultimately manifest itself in this situation.
Okay, I think there's someone online, Renee's found there.
She's here, but she typed it and she can't unmute herself.
Oh, she can't unmute, no, she's there, so she
I
can't.
use my theater voice.
Okay, so what does she have? So,
This is for Tim. Slide 24, Tim Parker's presentation shows 33 million acre feet of fresh water. How much brackish water? I thought I saw 36 million acre feet of brackish water. What happens if the amount of fresh water you are estimating is incorrect and you end up without enough fresh water and the IWB-WD plan is chosen by the judge in the adjudication? Then what is the water district going to do to supply the district customers?
yes.
So first of all, I want to make one point is there's no intent to use all that water. You know, the Sigma and all the efforts going on in the basin are to become sustainable by 2040. So that's the goal. These estimates are just something that needed to be done, and to also demonstrate what we thought was the appropriate way to estimate the storage in the basin. So it's all part of the master plan to have a better understanding. But again, you know, if we're off on that, we're not planning on using all that, but it's there. So hopefully that answers the question.
There's another question.
Okay, no, go ahead.
The 14,300 acre feet is just an average. What if the recharge is closer to the sustainable yield of 6,600 acre feet? What will happen if the water district does not have enough fresh water to send district ratepayers? Tim Parker said the 14,300 was an average between the guesstimate high and low of the safe yield report he gave.
The 14,300 is based on the calculations we did to estimate the safe yield, which is basically the pumping minus the storage change over time. So that's a 10-year running average. The 6,600 to the, I think it was 29,000, was just literature based. So those are previous studies, the range of previous studies that were reported.
Thank you, Renee. Okay, Wes.
Yeah, I guess I'm having a hard time getting myself on mute, but just one question. I know some of you folks are part of the GA. If I recall correctly, when the GA studied how much water it needed to report, it took into account the average amount that could be expected from the state. So I think it factored in that 40 or 60% or whatever it was. So I think that's a partial answer to that question. I believe that was factored in when the imported amount of water was decided. So I could be wrong on that, but thought I'd figure that out. Yeah, the number you used is 1,662% efficiency, so that's what the GA is.
Okay. Is everybody worn out yet? Anybody is welcome to contact the water district with further questions if you like. And I truly encourage it. With that, I'm going to go ahead and start with the final comments from the board. So I'm going to pass it down to Stan.
I would just like to remind everybody that what you've seen tonight is a very top level of an overview of 3 highly technical documents. Those documents are on the Water District website. I know this is an emotional topic, and I know people are emotional about it, and we're going to talk about it, and that's fine. But what would really help us is if you take a look at the documents and then provide us feedback on any questions you might have with emphasis on technical comments, technical questions, that kind of thing to help us make these documents better. They are a living document. We have not put them in stone yet like the GA has. And we're trying to refine our estimates as best we can, but right now we're using the data that's the best that we've got. So there's no point in using something else. When we get something better, we use something better. But in the meantime, if you have comments, by all means, our general manager's name, phone number, email is on the website. Make sure you use them and get your questions in. Thank you.
Director Sandemon's comments. One of the most important issue is the purchase of water rights from Northern California at a time when larger valleys, more wealthy cities, and agricultural interests in the San Joaquin Valley are also looking to purchase those water rights. So the question was asked, what if your numbers are wrong? We have high confidence in our numbers. What if we can't buy the water that is being planned to put through the pipeline? What does that do to the community? What does that do to the economic burden upon the individuals who are living here? I address a comment about water storage. Water storage is a nice number. It gives us some cushion to come up with a proper solution. But what really controls the entire argument is the Sigma's requirement for sustainability. And that means
not using more water than on average we are getting from recharge. So that is critical. The water district has, customers have reduced their usage almost 40%, on their way to 50%. They've done a marvelous job with that, and that is at a time when the town has been growing at its usual rate, which isn't a huge rate. It's maybe 0.5% or 1% per year, but the town has grown during that time, and water usage has gone down. And then we haven't seen the bottom of that. So first, please continue to water your trees. Established trees don't require too much irrigation, but there is additional things that can be done. We could find someone who could give us a grant to help people replace their swamp coolers. There's a large pool of water that could be conserved during the summer. So there are a couple of options we have, and I'd like to see us work together to come up with a reasonable solution that's effective, that plans for the future, and it's cost effective for the residents of the valley.
Thank you. I'm going to say again, thank you for coming. It's an emotional thing, but you have to remember that these reports, these studies, everything that's being done is for the benefit of this valley. There's no other motive behind it. We at the Water District believe that there's solutions that exist beyond hundreds of millions of dollars in burdening this community with those kind of costs over the years. It's just not sustainable, economically feasible for the size of our community. Sure, if we were 100,000 people, maybe, but not this. This is way too much. I see too many people who struggle to pay now, and all we'll do is it's going to get worse. So I encourage anybody that's involved, anybody that's listening to us, come to the district. We'll sit with you. As Travis said, as the board here said, as Tim has said, if you want to come and detailed look at the numbers and how they were put together and what your recommendations are, let's get those, let's talk. Because keep in mind that the numbers from the cost analysis came from the GA's engineering firms. All that was done were things were added in and also operational. The things that were added with things that were neglected, environmental costs, things like that. So those costs are real costs. So to sit there and say they're a fallacy is not a true statement. I don't like to operate in fear. Keep in mind that the pumping, 19,140 in 2023. That's amazing from 35,000. In the water district alone, we used to pump well over 9,000 acre feet a year. And what are we now? 5,500? That's an amazing amount. So the community is working really hard to get the usage down to meet the sustainability requirements as necessary. Are there little things that may be needed? I believe there's a lot of puzzle pieces there that can be put together to make up the small amount needed. If the courts decide 14.3 is feasible based on all the data that's presented and all the scientists' testimony, and then like I said right now, for everything but agriculture is 11,000 acre feet and going down. I see that there's many easier solutions to this pipeline. So I encourage you to understand why we're doing what we're doing, why we entered the adjudication. I believe a lot of people think it's some kind of a lawsuit against the GA. It is not. It's an adjudication. All the major pumpers want to know what their water rights are. That's why you see them participating in this. It isn't that there's any hip-to-hip partnership. Everybody's looking out for their own water rights. There's going to be cooperation. The judge insists upon cooperation if possible, wherever possible. That'll always happen. But it is not the water district suing the GA. That's for sure. The GA is there because they want to be there. And I believe that's all I have. I thank you for coming. Please come to the water district meetings. Please question. And give them this. Always call George. All of the board directors have emails. You're welcome to email any of us at any time if you have questions or concerns. And so with that, unless the board has any more, I'm going to officially close this meeting at 9:06. Again, I thank you. I know it's been a long evening. Thank you.
Can we hand these out? Can we hand these out? We have hard copies of tonight's presentation if you'd like a hard copy. Oh.